Good afternoon everybody, or evening, and welcome to the Planning Committee of Monday the 15th of November. I've been asked to let everybody know that this is not being live broadcast at the moment because we've got another issue, but it will be downloaded tomorrow morning so the public have access to details. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Chris Buswell and Councillor Rachel Sutton. I think other than that, we've got everybody here. Yep. Okay, thank you. Can I ask that we approve the minutes of the previous meeting as accurate and fair? Being proposed by Councillor Bialik. Anyone like to second? Thank you, Councillor Dennin. All those in favour? Same rules for declarations of interest as always, if you could let us know before the application comes up. And we won't be putting anything under Local Government Access to Information Act 1985, so there's nothing in Part 2, so you're all welcome to stay for the whole time. In which case, moving on to item number 5, which is planning application 2104 Full, the Harkin Centre, Paul Street, and that's you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This is a full application for the redevelopment of the Harlequin Centre on Paul Street. The proposal is to develop 2 co-living accommodation blocks following the demolition of the existing shopping centre, as well as a pedestrian bridge to replace the existing bridge over Paul Street. Change of use of the upper floors of 21 to 22 Queen Street to further co-living accommodation and associated works including parking, landscaping, new amenity areas and public realm improvements. This first slide shows the location of the application site, which I'm sure most members are familiar with. This is an area of the existing shopping centre, just to point out the existing trees to the south of the site. This is another three-dimensional aerial view, just pointing out some of the key buildings and uses around the site. And these are some photographs taken of the existing shopping centre, including to the rear and of the scheduled city wall, which is to the rear of the site. This slide just shows the current constraints. The site is within the central conservation area and also adjoins the St David's conservation area. And this slide shows other heritage assets around the site, including the scheduled city wall monument, which runs adjacent to the site to the north, as well as a number of Grade 2, Star, Grade 2 and locally listed buildings. An overview of the proposal, as mentioned, is to demolish the existing shopping centre and to develop 2 blocks of co-living accommodation, as well as change of use of the upper floors of 21 to 22 Queen Street into co-living accommodation. A total of 383 bed spaces will be provided, which is 132 more than the previous approved scheme for a co-living block and a hotel on the site. Block 1 to the north will comprise 138 studios and 18 cluster flats with 107 cluster bedrooms. Block 2 to the south, replacing the hotel, will comprise 133 studios, whilst 21 to 22 Queen Street, 2 floors above retail use on the ground floor, will comprise 5 studios. As with other co-living schemes, 20% will be affordable housing, in this case comprising 55 studios and 21 cluster bedrooms, which will be prioritised for essential local workers. The scheme includes a new landscaped square between the blocks and a pocket park in the southwest corner. Paul Street will be narrowed from at present being between 4 and 3 carriageways to 2 lanes, with the footways widened on either side and a new public cycle parking provided. The existing public car park on the site will be removed. However, 9 spaces will be retained for local businesses beneath Block 2. 2 disabled spaces and 2 electric vehicle car park spaces will also be provided Block 2 for the co-living use. This is the proposed site plan showing the green and brown roofs on the site, as well as photovoltaic panels which are shaded in grey on top of the buildings. And moving on to the floor plans, this is the lower ground floor plan of Block 1. Purple shaded areas are the communal amenity areas. Just moving up a floor, this is the ground floor, again with another communal amenity area facing onto the existing square to the north of the site with a landscaped terrace behind. Moving up again to the mezzanine level, this will comprise a number of studio apartments shaded in pink, as well as a smaller local amenity area shaded in yellow. And as we move up the building, you'll see that it will comprise a mix of studios, which are shaded pink, and cluster flats shaded in blue, with some smaller local amenity areas shaded in yellow. And this is the second floor, third floor, fourth floor, and the fifth floor. Moving over to Block 2, this is the block replacing the hotel previously approved. This is the lower ground floor, which shows communal amenity areas shaded in purple, as well as 5 studios shaded in pink. And you can see the parking, which will be retained for local businesses. Beneath Block 2, over on the right hand side, and 4 parking spaces provided for the co-living use. And again, moving up the building on the ground floor, there will be a large communal amenity area that will open onto the new landscape square between the buildings. And then this building will comprise solely of studio apartments and no cluster apartments. So again, moving up the building, first floor, second floor, third floor, and fourth floor. This slide shows the street scenes. The top street scene shows the view from Paul Street, and the bottom street scene shows the rear of the buildings as viewed from Northern Hayes Street. 2 more street scenes. The top image here shows a street scene from Queen Street with the building at Block 1 can be viewed above the existing buildings along Queen Street, and the bottom street scene shows the view from Bartholomew Street east and Bartholomew Street west, so from the southwest direction. And this is the elevation of Block 1 facing onto the new landscaped square in between the buildings, described as landscape gardens within the application. Likewise, this is the elevation of Block 2 facing onto the landscaped gardens. This is the hardworks plan. This shows new hard surface materials provided on the site, and just zoomed in onto the landscaped square in between the buildings. As can be seen, the existing vehicle ramp to the Guildhall Shopping Centre car park will be retained, and a new interpretation centre will be provided beneath it. This is the Softworks Plan, and just zooming in onto the Pocket Park to the southwest of the site. 3 trees will be retained along the Paul Street frontage, whilst unfortunately 4 trees will have to be removed to make way for the new access into the site. This is a 3D image of the new interpretation centre, which will provide an educational facility in association with RAM, providing information about the scheduled city wall and history of this particular part of the city. This is the image of the new footbridge across Hall Street to replace the existing footbridge. Be of a slightly smaller, less heavyweight design than the existing footbridge in order to fit into the character of the proposed new buildings. And I'm about to show a number of LVIA views of the proposal, and there's quite a few slides here, and I'll simply go through them and pause briefly on each one. So this is the view towards the proposed development from Upper Paul Street and from Queen Street. This is from Queen Street from outside Central Station. Again, from Queen Street, slightly further back, near to the Rougemont Hotel. And this is the view looking down from Bartholomew Street West. This view is taken in winter when the existing trees have obviously shed their leaves. And this is taken further down that street from Bartholomew Street East. This is a view from the Iron Bridge, and what was required in terms of the design was to ensure that the two cathedral towers wouldn't be blocked by the proposed building from this view. And this is further down on the Iron Bridge. You can just see top of block 2 above the roofline of the existing buildings. And this is again from the Iron Bridge. We can just see a glimpse of block 2 between the two buildings there. And this is down on Northern Hay Street, so again a glimpse of block 2 through this gap. Moving up Northern Hay Street, you can see the building there above the city wall, and that is number 46 Northern Hay Street. This is slightly further up the road. In this view, you can't see the building because it would be screened by the wall here. This will be the view between the two listed gate pillars, where there's an existing car park. This is looking back down the street, where you can see block 2 above the wall. And slightly further up the street, again looking back down, and this view largely screened by vegetation and the wall. This is a view looking down Maddox Row, which at the moment leads to the service area of the shopping centre, whereas instead this will lead to a new footpath that will lead on towards Paul Street. And this last image shows the proposed building and proposed landscape gardens adjacent to the scheduled city wall. And then the last image again shows a similar view, a bit more of block 2 in view. As members will see from the officer's report, the conclusion is that the proposed development is acceptable. Whilst it will cause some harm to heritage assets in the vicinity of the site, it will also bring heritage benefits, including improved access to the city wall by the general public and improved public realm within the conservation area. There will also be public benefits overall, and these are considered to outweigh the less than substantial harm that are caused to heritage assets. The layout and design of the scheme are very similar to the previously approved application for a co-living block and a hotel on the site. However, officers consider the scheme to be an improvement over the already consented scheme in terms of the quality of the architecture, as well as increased active frontage onto Paul Street and its sustainability by removing the public car parking on the site. Therefore, the recommendation is to grant planning permission for this proposed development, subject to the completion of a Section Y6 legal agreement to secure the list of obligations which are shown on the screen before you, which I won't read out, as well as a number of conditions which are included in the additional information sheet that members would have received on Friday. We have a time limit to complete the 106 by 15th of May, and if we haven't agreed an extension of time, it's a dual recommendation where the application would be refused for not including a 106 agreement to include the list of obligations. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, we've got two questions so far. Councillor Barlick and then Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. Forgive me if it's contained within 129 pages that we've had to read, not on this item but in general, if I've missed it somewhere. Two things. If you could get up on the screen the Bartholomew Street East view, looking down up through Paul Street. That one. That's it. So my point there is, I think I understood why that walkthrough was there prior when it was a hotel and all that lot. If it's going to be, if we agree it's going to be co-living in student, what's the point of that? The walkthrough, you know, through to the old park doesn't exist there. Looks like it's being retained, and there must be a reason for it. And what is its purpose now? It's going to be solely co-living, because when I look at that, to me, it makes an ugly road even uglier. It just sort of takes your eye away. So I wonder what the purpose was. And it may be too late with consideration. This would be something for you to do, Chair, is consideration, because I think it looks ugly. And is it necessary? That's just a remark. And then, and up again, up this ugly street, which hopefully it will become better, is can we make sure that the lighting, particularly on what is now the other side of the road, good lighting for safety purposes for women and girls, and not just them, me as well, because I walk up and down there and I don't particularly like it late at night. So as long as we're making measures to make that a safer, better street, that's it. Have you incorporated that in that walkway? That's what I'd like to.
Just to clarify, this image is not actually showing the proposed improvements to Paul Street. This is an indicative image, and it's just showing the proposed buildings on the left-hand side as well as the footbridge across the street. It's not showing the narrowing down of Paul Street and the improved street improvement works, and of course it will include good quality lighting. And one of the benefits, as we put in the report, of this proposal compared to the existing situation is it does include active frontage, so that's rooms with windows at ground floor level.
Will that walkway stay there? Is that what you're saying?
When you say the walkway, do you mean the bridge?
Right in front of us there.
The footbridge, yeah.
Yeah, the
okay.
footbridge.
Yeah.
And is it necessary now? What's the thoughts on that? Am I the only one who regard that as like take your eye away from Florence Street? That's all, I'll leave it there.
Well, it was approved as part of the already consent scheme. We did question whether it was needed during the pre-act discussions or for the previous scheme. And the answer was it is, and I think it is, whilst it does partially block the view up the street, it's considered an improvement over the existing bridge, which is a much sort of heavier structure. And the benefit of it is it improves permeability, so it does provide a route for pedestrians to walk into the Guildhall shopping centre that way. There is, as you're probably aware, alternative routes up to the Guildhall shopping centre, but they're not very attractive in terms of internal
Thanks,
steps.
Matthew. I think we probably could answer that one. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's in regard to the comments in the residential amenity section, page 35 of your report about. We're often told that these applications are difficult to deal with because they don't fit planning guidance or national standards, etc. So we have to work through them. I'm interested in the phrase in the amenity states that this is a genuine co-living scheme. Could I ask what criteria you use to make a judgment of whether a co-living scheme is acceptable or not?
The two main things we're looking for is a good amount of communal amenity space spread throughout the scheme as a whole. And within the management plan, we're looking for proposals to include a sort of communal atmosphere within the building, so organised social events and that sort of thing. That's what we understand happens in existing co-living schemes. What we don't want is just buildings comprising very small accommodation and not having adequate communal amenity facilities.
Councillor Hannaford, then Councillor Moore, Councillor Henson, Councillor Williams, anyone else? And Councillor Brass. Okay, in that order, so Councillor Hannaford.
Thank you. Page 34, affordable housing. What is your interpretation of the phrase affordable cluster bed spaces, please? What is your interpretation of that, and how does that differ from the other types of accommodation in this development? And my second question is around the management of the proposed development. It's a lot of units, about 400 units. What assurances do we have on how that will be actually managed? Because I think there would be a concern that maybe one or two people antisocial behaviour, whatever, how it would be managed, how it would be progressed, because it only takes one sort of apple in the barrel to make a problem. We all know that happens, Chair, in one block of flats. It just takes one flat to be doing something it shouldn't be doing, and it has an impact. So I think future-proofing it maybe. What assurances have you had on how that's going to be tackled in the best way? And what examples do you have where this is elsewhere in the country? How have they managed, a large residential block of co-living effectively in that case? Thank you, Chair.
Well, there are two types of accommodation being provided. There are studio apartments and cluster flats, which include a shared kitchen, stroke amenity area for solely the people in that cluster flat, so usually 5 or 6 bedrooms. To split the affordable up evenly, we require a proportion of studios and a proportion of cluster flats. So that's the distinction. In terms of assurances over management, it's exactly the same as the already consented scheme. So there is a management plan that has been submitted, and that would be attached to the Section 106 legal agreement. So that's how, if we weren't happy, we could take action because it's within the actual legal agreement. In terms of examples, obviously there have been 2 consented schemes within Exeter, but obviously this is a new scheme for the Harlequin Centre, and the other scheme is currently still being built. There have been examples of co-living schemes in London and some of the major big cities. And my understanding is they also have management plans.
Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Chair. There's several bits that it is a pity that we haven't got the whole. I think Matt did say that he didn't show the frontage of Paul Street. It would have been helpful if we could have seen what has been decided to remind what it is. And did you mention that, I didn't quite pick up, the fact that the bridge, is it going to exist as it is? Can you answer those two? Because I've got about another 3 items. If you can answer those two.
Well, as I said earlier, the existing bridge will be removed, but it will be replaced with another slightly smaller bridge in basically the same location. Your first question I didn't quite follow.
Well, you've shown Paul Street as that is. but we haven't shown the fact what the frontage it will be.
Yeah, I did include a slide, a street scene.
All we are getting, I'm not speaking for the others, but I'm speaking for myself. I'm getting half a building, what is going to be, and I would have liked it to see what the part of the frontage, what will remind us what the frontage was going to be. Wall Street. You're not showing that.
I think the issue is that this application is a returning application, and we have seen all of those images, and we all know what Wall Street
That
looks
is
like.
true.
So you've got to bear in mind, from my point of view as the chair, we could spend hours just looking at pictures, and Matt's got to give it to you sort of in 10, 15 minutes. So I think, in fairness to this committee, I'm pretty sure all of us know what Wall Street looks like at the moment, and it's not the prettiest view that we possibly
No,
ever see.
I totally agree. That's what I'm trying to get at, is the fact that we have to decide on a building that's going to affect Exeter in the next 75 years. And the point is, we should have the whole. But I take your point in what you said, Chair. The other several things that I was trying to pick up, but there's a line and a half back in these huge amount of pages that we've had to read. The infrastructure, there's not much said of the runoff of this building. Can our infrastructure take the runoff, what is extra to what exists now? And there is about a 9.5 about flooding and things like that further back, but it's got to be good.
Okay, is that the question?
It is a question.
Okay, I'll get an answer then.
Sorry, Councillor, did you say you were struggling?
Well, I was trying to...
Yeah, I mean, it will be an improvement. As with any development, you have to aim for as high a sustainable drainage hierarchy as possible. So you're going to aim for natural drainage as much as possible in this location. That's not possible because of the archaeology and contamination. But you've got, the 1980s development covered in hard surfacing, the new development which is going to incorporate sustainable drainage measures such as green roofs, brown roofs, controlled runoff into the local sewer system. So it will be an improvement over the existing situation. There is a section on flood risk and surface water management in the committee report.
Oh, all right, that's fine. Because I mean, you talk about 1980. I was on the committee when we did the 1981. The other thing is that when it says on page 69, where it says co-living management plan monitoring, can you tell me how is that going to be monitored? Is it going to be monitored how many people are extra in there, or is there going to be a plan set up that it's going to stay as co-living and not a whole load of extra people in there that's going to claim the housing later on?
From memory, because the legal agreement is going to work in the same way as the legal agreement for the already consented scheme, the developers will have to submit an annual report to show how the building has been managed, including how the affordable units have been let. So I can't remember the exact details because I was working on that many months ago, and we have yet to start working on the new legal agreement. So, but that's how it's intended to work. Sorry if that's not a very good answer.
I assume from what you're saying is that anyone who lives in there will have the same right as anyone else who moves to Exeter to claim a local... Sorry. I've got a horrid cold and I'm trying not to spread it. Anyone who lives in that accommodation chooses to move in and pays their rent and their council tax legitimately has the right to make a local connection like anyone else who moves to Exeter, if that's what we're trying to imply. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then they can claim on our housing if they want, but we can't have control over who chooses to move to Exeter, unfortunately. Councillor Williams. Oh no, Councillor Moore. Sorry, she was next.
Thank you. I have 2 questions, I think. I wondered if we could talk about the transport arrangements, please. So there's a document in the associated planning document setting out the changes to Paul Street. Can you tell me about how the proposed changes fit in with the measures that will be implemented to keep the Iron Bridge one way and the changes on Queen Street? Are the sections in orange not going to? Are the sections in orange not going to continue to be a traffic lane? And why isn't there segregated cycle lanes in line with the new Department of Transport guidance? It seems to me that there is potential danger with cars travelling up the and turning left to go up the ramp or coming out of that, with people going across the pavement. And I am worried about people trying to jump the wrong way down the Iron Bridge in order to access the site. So are you satisfied that the site is accessible by cars in a safe way?
I'm going to pass that across to we've got someone from Devon Highways, so they're probably better space. You'll probably need to steal Councillor by Alex. Microphone though, so everyone can hear you.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you'll be aware that there's currently a consultation out on Queen Street changes following the emergency active travel fund measures. This application has obviously come in to be decided before that consultation is finalised, but our response is outlined in the agreement with the developer for this site that changes to Queen Street will be incorporated to the layout on Queen Street and Paul Street. So through what's called a Section 278 agreement, which outlines the changes to the highway, would effectively link in with the changes on Queen Street. So the 278 works for this application will go up to the corner of the junction between Paul Street and Queen Street. And then with the developer, we've also agreed to link into future changes on Bartholomew Street. And in terms of the pedestrian and cycle access, we're satisfied that it meets standards. We know that the LTM 120 guidance is for a transition away from shared space towards segregated facilities. But due to the flows on Paul Street on the route, it will provide for cyclists. We're content that there's the balance, on balance rather, the benefits to pedestrians and cyclists in widening footway on both sides will lead to an improved public realm and adequate access for cyclists. Happy to answer any further questions at that answer.
Thank you for a moment. I think Councillor Moore might have a follow-up.
Can I, yes, and I've got 2 other questions, but then you'll need to come back at the end, but I've got 2 other topics. So I'm not clear from your response, sorry. The upper part of Paul Street, which is marked in orange in the plans, is that proposed to be a cycle path only, or is it proposed to close that lane of traffic if the Queen Street arrangements? It's not very clear from what you've said what the arrangements will be if Queen Street stays as it is under the new arrangements.
No, I don't need to count the number of colour and orange.
Sorry, Councillor Moore, which plan in the presentation? Is it this one that you meant?
Yeah, I'm looking at the one
Chair, can I help? I mean, if Councillor Moore, if you're thinking, if I don't get an answer to this, I'm likely to not be able to vote or vote against. I get that.
No, it's not that.
Or if it's a question that you need to that they can come back with more clarification for you after the event, that would be maybe the problem. Because I think I get what you say, I'd like to hear it, but it sounds like we're not going to get a definitive response. That's my concern.
So I appreciate you sharing your concern, Councillor Bailey. I mean, the important thing is that the junction via Duranham is quite a dangerous junction for crossing, and I just want to know how the new arrangements connect with the existing arrangements. And I think it's really important that we understand it, because it's not clear from the documents what's happening at the top of Paul Street.
As I put in the committee report, the consultation that Devon County Council were running about the changes ended on the 13th of October. But as far as I know, and Alex can correct me if I'm wrong, a decision on whether those changes do happen hasn't taken place yet. So the plans have been designed to fit in with the existing highway arrangements. But what the advice of Devon County Council has been is if Devon County Council vote to approve those changes permanently, but they've not done so yet, to get the proposals to tie in with the new arrangements, that will be done through the Section 278 Highways Agreement. My understanding is that they would actually be quite minor, and Alex, and again correct me if I'm wrong, because ultimately you're talking about, again, narrowing the highway on Queen Street and just having a wider footway to connect in with the wider footways along Paul Street. But obviously we can't go into details because it's not been designed yet, because we don't know if that's actually going to happen or not.
Did you have another question?
Thank you. That's a helpful response to know how it's likely to change, because it's that corner is a concern to me. I just got clarification on the economic benefits. The report says there's going to be a net benefit of I think 36 jobs. How does that compare to the previous application? My other point relates to the proposal for the co-living for the whole of the site. How does that comply with policy CP5 in terms of a mixed development in the community and considering the needs of the St David's neighbourhood area in terms of creating a balanced community?
Again, in the report, in section 16.1, we referenced CP5, and apart from the fact that co-living as a use has been permitted already on this site, we consider that the scheme complies with that policy because it does meet the needs of a specific section of the community who would otherwise most likely live in houses of multiple occupation. Sorry, could you repeat the first question?
Thank you. The first question was about the number of jobs created with this scheme, which is a net jobs of 36, total jobs of 78 compared to the previous.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that's a public record, but I'd have to look at the committee report for the last application to compare. I don't have that before me. From memory, slightly fewer jobs will be provided in this scheme than before, because obviously without having a hotel there would be fewer jobs. You would still have security, cleaners and so on, those sorts of jobs as part of this scheme. In terms of actual numbers, I'd have to go and look at the old report, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Okay, now it's Councillor Williams. Thank you, Chair. Matt, I've got three questions. One is, what's the provision for disabled people? So it says that there are 2 parking spaces. Is that based on an accepted proportion of the number of people who it's intended that will be accommodated here, disabled? And it doesn't say anything about disabled accommodation, what the allocation is. Perhaps, do you want to take them one at a time, or shall I give you all 3?
That's okay.
Yeah. The second is it assumed that all the accommodation, not just studio flats and the cluster flats, are going to be single occupancy, or is there scope for double occupancy? And my third question is the section on waste collection. Has it been, are the arrangements future-proofed to enable both food and glass collection as we're moving towards that?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The two blocks will include specific rooms designed for disabled people. In accordance with the Sustainable Transport Supplementary Planning document, in effect this is a car-free development, but even for car-free developments the advice is that you should provide an element of disabled parking. So this will include 2 spaces to meet that requirement.
Can I just talk, it's just how was that calculated?
It's not being calculated. It's been effectively what's come out of the design process. Obviously there's a lot of design issues that need to be provided for. So there were 2 parking spaces left for disabled people. As I understand it, the consented scheme didn't include any specifically for disabled people. But this time there were 2 left over after removing the public parking spaces, and the advice that we gave to the developers was that that should be provided for the disabled residents, most likely for meeting the move-in and move-out requirements, as opposed to actually allowing a disabled person to own a car and keep it on the site. My understanding is that the units will be single occupancy. And yes, in terms of waste collection, we did consult our waste and recycling team, who specifically looked at the proposals to make sure that the waste facilities would be future-proofed. That led to some revised plans, which actually incorporated increasing the size of the waste bins. So that has been looked at as part of the application process.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Branston.
Thank you. How will the decision or criteria be made on which medical centre will be given the grant of £98,000?
That will come out through consulting the Devon NHS, the Trust, and then making that decision. At the moment, in their consultation response, they've cited 3 medical centres where that money could be spent.
3, did you say? On here, it only refers to the Barnfield and the St Leonard's.
If you look in the recommendation, section 18 of the committee report, it says 98,000 to improve facilities at either Barnfield Hill Medical Practice, Southernham Medical Practice or St Leonard's Medical Centre. So we've asked the question of the NHS, sorry, the CCG, Clinical Commissioning Group, and that's the advice we've received.
Okay.
If they want it to go to any particular medical centre, we're happy to oblige.
Okay.
Right, so that concludes the questions. We're now going to move over to members of public speaking. We've got Chris Stubbs speaking in favour. That's it, make your way up there. You get 3 minutes and we'll shout when you're running out of time, okay?
I can do that. Sorry. Thank you. Good evening. You've already heard probably much of what I was going to say. But this is obviously the second application which has come before this committee. The first, just over a year ago, followed a long period of consultation relating to the principles of development, site constraints, the impact of proposals. That previous application was approved. Things have changed. The application before you now includes 2 blocks of co-living accommodation, as you've heard, and excludes the hotel that was previously proposed. The 2 blocks are very similar in their scale and location to those approved last year. As part of the process of reconsidering the buildings, the cluster rooms have been made slightly larger than originally, and the amount of communal space increased, but the buildings have actually remained the same or if anything reduced slightly in size, because we've rationalised the internal circulation within the buildings. These new co-living blocks will contribute obviously to meeting housing needs in the city and the city's vision for a livable Exeter. They provide high quality accommodation. The buildings will be managed 24/7 by a team on site, and they've been designed to passive house principles. We have, as you've heard, removed the majority of car parking from the basement. The car parking that remains is for local employers, with the 2 spaces for disabled drivers you've just spoken about, and the 2 electric vehicle spaces, which we anticipate will be occupied by a car club. There will also be 280 cycle spaces on site for a mix of residents and visitors. So over the course of this application, we've worked closely with your officers and other stakeholders relating to the detailing scheme. That's included, as you will have seen from the website, the police liaison officer, the fire officer, the highways authority, environmental health, the refuse team that's been referenced, and also Historic England. This has resulted in development which we believe is more attractive than previously approved and provides more active frontage, as was mentioned, to the city wall and to the street, and provide a safe environment for residents and neighbours within the buildings. There will be impacts both on the historic environment and on neighbours. However, that careful design process and the building's active management, we believe those impacts have been minimised. Therefore, your officers in the comprehensive report and in the responses they've just provided have concluded that the harm is less than substantial and the benefits outweigh those impacts. Thank you very much.
Would you be happy to answer any questions?
Of course, yes.
Councillor Mitchell, that's all I have to do.
Do you want me to stay?
Yeah, so that when we put the forecast out in Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Hudson, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor.
I think just 3 relatively succinct points. In regard to the 20% of the accommodation that's going to be affordable private rented,
Yes.
is that going to be managed by the same company that manages the whole block, or is it a separate organisation that's going to be looking after the 20% affordable rented pool? And are we right in thinking that government legislation states that rents in the affordable section are up to 80% of the local market rents? In that case, is that the market rents for student accommodation in the town, which currently go from 220 to 309 a week? In regard to the second question, the balance of 80% of the properties, in your business plan, what percentage do you think will go to long-term local residents who work in the area, and what percentage to university students?
Councillor Mitchell, that's not going to be a question you can answer, is it? Because no one can predict the future. So rather than making this a student-led political issue, can we ask questions that we think Mr. Dove can actually answer, please? You answered the first question, didn't you? Right.
Oh, right, sorry, yes. I thought there was that...
No, I can't ask questions.
Yeah, okay. The first question was about who controls the 20%. So that, the expectation, and as we just said, we are looking forward, but the expectation is that it will all be managed by the same organisation. So that there is a management company who will organise the whole, who will manage the whole building. And yeah, your point about 80% of market rent, it will be 80% of that, the market rent for that type of accommodation rather than
80% of what the other people are paying within similar occupations.
Yeah, that's what we are expecting, yes.
Councillor Nelson.
Can you answer, there's several questions I would like to ask. Is there any disturbance of historic Exeter wall at all? The same question that I asked earlier was the living, co-living management. How is that going to be monitored in a way that is satisfied that there is no extra families within there. If you are renting out, you rent it out to the person, etc. And the pods, I call them pods, but small living, are they pods or are they living quarters? Some countries call them pods, some countries like to call them rooms, but are they above the light and air space that is required?
Fine. The first question was about the wall.
Well, the historic.
The city wall.
Yeah, city wall.
There will be, there's no physical connection, disturbance to the wall.
All right. There is a bell. There was a historic bell where a foundry just.
Oh yes, the bell foundry. Yes.
That still exists. Is there anything to open that up or not, or is that going to be built over?
I don't believe there's any opportunity to.
All right, fair enough. We've answered that.
Right. In terms of monitoring and in terms of the occupation of the rooms themselves, that will be monitored and managed by the management company. As I think was mentioned, there is as part of the Section 106 agreement, shared spaces, community spaces will be highlighted and won't be permissible to change those to accommodation without consent. So they will be identified on the plan.
That's what I was getting
as
at.
part of the Section 106 agreement. Yeah. So those purple areas and the yellow areas that you saw on the plans will be defined as that in the section, as part of the Section 106 agreement.
As young business people.
And the final point about, we call them studio rooms or cluster flats. So the studio room is self-contained, has a small kitchenette, as well as a bathroom and a bed and a desk. A cluster flat is a series of flats that shares a kitchen. And they have a front.
Thank you.
Is that?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Hamford?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. For us as members looking at this from a sustainable point of view, sustainability generally, in drawing up your business plan and looking at, I presume other schemes in London, for example, and management plans, whatever, do you have an average length of time when somebody would be living in there? I'm sure that you know it's hold on to a piece of string, but on the other hand, it's just for us to get a view. Student accommodation in one half is we're looking to compromise perhaps on the size and the amenities of these properties. I think if you look at student flats, okay, we can do that because it's for a finite amount of time and they're working towards it. Would it kind of be more accurate to describe these in a way as sort of stepping stones to other accommodation in due course? I know it worked for some people for some time, but for others I'm thinking, and it follows on from Councillor Williams' point of view, somebody has a partner, they want to start a family, they want to move out, etc., etc. So it's for us looking at this in the medium to longer term, should we pass it, how, I know I'm getting asking you probably to put a crystal ball, but I'm just trying to get a feel of the compromise on the living space, the compromise on lots of things, but for what sort of average sort of stay time?
I realise I have the cold and I'm a bit irritable with everybody, but can we ask planning related questions? This isn't just to dig at you, Councillor Hanford, I'm not going to let the gentleman answer, but can we ask planning related questions and not predicting the future questions, if that's okay from now on? Would that be okay? Thank you.
But Chair, with respect, you know, one of the issues that I'm concerned about in these flats is the mental health of the people in them, and if they're feeling cooped up or if, you know, it doesn't work out, it's a valid concern. I'm sorry, because that would weigh me on how I would decide it.
What I can say is there's a minimum period of 3 months in terms of the contract. There isn't a maximum. There is a significant variation of experience in co-living and similar accommodation across the country. Some is relatively short periods, and if you go to some of the elements schemes in London,
you'll find very short periods of time, sort of a week or 2 weeks of accommodation. That's not the case here. It will be 3 months. And that's where we then get into a slight world of a crystal ball, that we don't know what that market is going to be for Exeter as this process goes through. We haven't, for obvious reasons, marketed this site. We haven't got people looking yet, because we are realistically a year, 2 years away from opening anything. So it's very hard to answer that question honestly.
And also, when this application came as before, I've had conversations with the housing team when no one is going to be forced to live in them either. It all is voluntary, so if 3 months isn't enough, is too much, it's then the person who lives there's choice to move on. So I appreciate what you're saying, that this is a commercial endeavour, and the people who buy the service get to leave. Right, Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. As well as to say actually that I'm welcoming this being a low-card development. This is what we need in the city centre, low-card developments. I wanted to pick up on the comment that you made and the comment that was made by the police. They asked a number of questions in their response. So I just wanted to get an understanding of what your view was on those comments. They actually asked what vetting is carried out of potential tenants, which I'd be rather concerned about. How will a sense of community ownership be created in a potentially large transient population? So I would like to know how you would address those issues identified in the police response. I am concerned about the impact of antisocial behaviour in the area as a result of the large transient population. And I'm also just a second question in terms of the tenancy arrangements and these properties being designed for single people and that many properties. Councils have to give regard to the Equalities Act. So in terms of your tenancy arrangements that we put in place, what arrangements will there be in order to protect pregnancy and maternity should a tenant become pregnant?
Sorry. In terms of the vetting, the management team for the property will be responsible for taking up applications, asking for references in the way you would in if this was the equivalent or the accommodation that people would otherwise be looking at probably is a HMO. You would have a landlord who would take references, take deposits in the way that would be done here. So that is set out in the management plan, and the management plan also has a disputes resolution process and a complaints process in terms of, it's not quite 3 strikes and you're out, but yeah, there's that process of complaint, review, warning for residents. In terms of community cohesion, that's the right term, internally and to a certain extent externally, the management team, again, you will have a manager of the building and their team. Part of their role is to, and again, this is set out in the management plan, is to organise events. We have various spaces within the building. What they will actually look like will be determined as we move forward into detailed design. But we will have spaces that the residents will be able to use, and may be able to set up events, cinema club, dining club, yoga, these sort of in spaces that will be run and managed and organised by the central team, basically. And it's that part of their role to engender that community, if you like, and to then encourage that relationship with the wider world as well. Your final point, I don't think I can answer, which is about pregnancy. The accommodation is is identified as single occupancy. that will be dealt with. The simple answer is I don't know, and I wouldn't like to stand in front of you and to provide that. It will be. I won't answer. I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Councillor Williams. Thank you, Chair. My question followed on from my previous question to Matt, and it's about the number of bed spaces that will be available to those with disability, and what proportion will be cluster bedrooms, flats, and what proportion will be studios.
The simple answer is I don't know off the top of my head. If you would like to give me 5 minutes to check, I will go back. There are disabled access rooms. There are also accessible. There are disabled rooms, accessible rooms. I cannot remember from the top of my head the numbers, but I can look it up for you.
Thank you, I'm actually grateful if you could do that.
Okay. Unless Matt is going to help me and has done that already. No. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify, I think you said, well, 2 questions really. I think you said that the affordable rent is based on 80% of the average rent for the occupants in the block, is that right?
That I think is right. That's what we're working on.
So my sort of follow-up on that is, presumably this is a bit of a premium development, and therefore the rents charged in the block would be higher than in the local area perhaps. You know, the LHA rate is probably like £570 a month for 1 bedroom, so presumably the average rents would be a lot higher than that. And I'm just wondering what would happen to that 20% if you are unable to fill those rooms because 80% of the full value is too much, quite simply for the local area.
That would then be subject to negotiation with the local authority in terms of how that is addressed. Yeah, 20% of these units will be affordable. It's how that process then works in that detail. We would have to come back to the council in the same way as we will if we can't fill it with the first. There's a sort of cascade of key workers and then people. So we would have to work that through with your officers.
Okay.
Councillor Mitchell was very helpfully giving me a bit of that answer. 80% is the maximum they could charge. They could charge less, and also they will initially be key workers, I believe, with this scheme, isn't it, Matt? If I'm remembering correctly, it was the key workers with affordable element.
Priority will be given to essential local workers for the affordable housing, yes.
And then after that, we start addressing different issues. Okay, but that will be managed with agreement with the council. Okay? Thank you very much for your time.
I will go and find you a number.
Thank you. I think Matt's trying as well, so maybe we'll get it between you. Right. Going to open the item for debate. Who'd like to go first? In the absence of anyone else, I'm going to let Councillor Bowler go first.
Oh, yeah.
Have you got a question?
I thought we were into the debate now.
We are, yeah. I was just checking. Yep, then start.
So I've taken my stuff, I'm all right now. I am, right. Okay, I've been listening to it, and it's, Chair, and I'm a little bit concerned with all the questions and detail about how, which are not matters for us. However, it has proved useful because some of us can take away some of those points to actually makes me wonder on how it will be done. We were told that they will administer the allocation of the 20%. I feel sure they'll work with our housing department. We'll make sure they work. We'll go back and we'll make sure. And one of the things I will be saying is that if somebody takes one of those smaller units, it shouldn't preclude them from bidding again for when an appropriate place comes up. All these sorts of things we can work out to make sure people. However, when I look at this, I mean, I know I keep saying things, and there's like a lot of fear. And I'm going to have to quote Franklin D. Roosevelt now. The only fear we have is fear itself. That's all we've got to be frightened of here. Come on, guys, look at what it's doing for our housing supply, or giving, well, if not our housing supply, the availability of housing for people in Exeter. To rebalance our city centre at the moment. To remove what I regard as, well, first of all, we've seen the map with all the listed buildings. No surprise that that building wasn't listed, although if we keep it there for about another 100 years, somebody will list it. I think it's time that that place was regenerated in this way. I look at some of it, and I look at some of the report, and it does say, with regard that in each case the level of harm to the significance of the heritage asset is considered to be less than substantial. Now, of course, that could be marginally less than substantial. It's however you look at it, of course. And then when I look at what it will bring about the redevelopment of the brownfield site, it will bring more housing. And the good thing about this, I don't know if it's all out there yet, is but our housing supply needs to be at least 5 years. And we were criticised for that, and we were open to a lot of challenge by these developers about having less than a 5-year land supply. And we need a more than a 5-year supply. Well, guess what? We've got over a 6-year supply now, and this adds to it. And why is that important, Chair? It's important about our policy, and one of the speakers mentioned livable Exeter. We have firm commitments that we do not want to build on the hills and the surrounding green land around this city. And so therefore we have to redevelop brownfield sites. We have to, in effect, go up if we are to defend those. And it's make your mind up time. Sorry, I keep using these things. It's make your mind up time on which direction we go. And I think we should be going in this direction. And isn't it funny how we had many a debate a long time ago about passive house, and we would spend ages talking about the importance of passive house. It was just said quite glibly, and this will be the passive house standard, as if we now accept it, that that is what it's going to be. For all those people, and myself included, who are concerned about the environment, just think about that impact. Now, I know some of the room sizes are still an issue, and one hopes that when we come to the local plan, we'll be able to enforce a bit more. But in one breath, your house is too big, you're using too much carbon. Now we've got a case, actually you're not using enough carbon, is that what we're saying? So the market will decide a lot of these people, and whether or not they will be able to get people to go into it. Redevelopment of the brown site. £25,000 contribution towards management, maintenance, repair and promotion of the city wall. Well, I've been around there lately and I've had a look, and you know, that will be well spent. The off-site public space contribution of £175,000. Planning areas contribution, surprised Councillor Harvey's not here, but there is a contribution of £45,000. Biodiversity, net gain, 669.45. Oh, that's what 0.45% is, by the way. But that's the amount of biodiversity that this is bringing to us. The other areas that it will improve, as I said about the housing supply, I'm glad of what they said about the walking way, the walking down through Paul Street. Councillor Hanford, you mentioned about mental health, and that is, of course, a very, very important factor. But as you know, sitting on the county council, there's a lot of people who live in isolated places, in rural communities, who equally have mental health issues, and they may not have nothing around them. So you've got to be careful, not just because you live in one of these, you will be subject to have mental health issues. This is a city centre area. And, you know, we've got to remember there is a compromise. And when you look at that compromise, we are not building homes in the middle of Exeter, nice garage, front garden, back garden, and we're not having that. Some of us may live in that sort of environment, and that's how we're living, but you cannot put that into here. There is a section of people who will want to occupy these houses, homes rather. And as for amenity space, well, they're going to have right on time there, aren't they? It's going to be terrible living in the middle of Exeter. Northern Egg Gardens, the Ram just round the corner, a fantastic passive house leisure centre shortly to open, marvellous bus station to be able to take you out somewhere, all these facilities, one of the top thriving city centres around. I don't think they're going to be short of amenity space. It's going to be managed correctly, which is far better. And we cannot go judging people who may or may not live in these properties. I think it's what we need in the city centre. It will help our housing supply, and I see nothing in these papers. I'm certainly not fearful. And I feel sure on various social media sites I may well be criticised, but guess what? I don't view them, so I'll never know. But I will be voting to support this. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Williams. Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to repeat what Councillor Bialik has just said. I agree with everything he has said. I think for me, the additional 132 bed spaces is really important. We have to remind people we have 3,200 people on the Devon Homes Choice waiting list. So this makes a significant difference to addressing the shortage of accommodation in Exeter. And for those who comment on student accommodation as well, I think something I've seen recently that the university is expanding by yet another nearly 1,000 students in the next year. So we've got to actually accept that and address it as well. So this development is going to make a significant contribution to the housing needs of Exeter. So thank you for that, and I will be supporting it. Some more?
Thank you. The principle of development on this site has already been approved, including the principle of greater density, which I have no problem with, and including the principle of build to rent. Now, the council doesn't have a policy on build to rent, so we're operating in a bit of a vacuum here. It has been mentioned that the market will decide, but first of all, we have to decide. And I think there's important consideration we need to bear in mind. It's talked about contribution to housing. Well, it's not clear that this is actually housing, it's more accommodation. And thank you, Councillor Sparks, for your comments, because it's quite concerning that we don't know what the proposed rents are for this accommodation. 80% of a level yet to be determined isn't clear, and the priority for housing and meeting the needs of those on the housing register is about affordable rent. Fundamentally, I'm concerned about the project not meeting the policy of CP5, and this is about all major developments where there's 10 or more in a development should be a mixed development to meet all the needs of members of the community. So in this area of St David's, there are significant numbers of purpose-built student accommodation, which is a high level of a transient community. There are very few homes to provide a mixed community and a balanced community. This development doesn't provide a mixture of homes, it provides accommodation for single people only. And I am concerned, because and I wouldn't have thought about this if it hadn't happened elsewhere in the ward, that actually if a woman does get pregnant and then by virtue of her pregnancy or maternity loses her home, I'm concerned that such a development could contravene the Equalities Act. I'm also concerned about the comments made by the police about the impact of this accommodation on the neighbourhood in terms of antisocial behaviour. It's not a fear of anything or anybody who might live there. By virtue of having a transient community that will move in and may not stay for long and move out, it's very difficult to make connections to a local area. So for that reason, I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Chair. I listened to Phil doing his usual speech, and he would know quite well that I'm frightened of nothing. Of if I need to ask questions that I feel is not clear, then I will ask them how difficult it might be and how embarrassing it might be. But I asked the question for the simple reason it's Councillor Williams that did say there was 1,700 on the priority on the list, the home choice list. Well, you can actually say a third of that is a priority list that is in more danger. Some of the others will never be housed for the simple reason they wouldn't qualify. The one thing that concerns me is when you're talking about home choice and somebody is in there and then they take in a partner, then the family comes along, that family can put its name on our list. Then they come priority because it's light and airspace. And that's what I was trying to get clear in my mind, was that the fact that we would not be picking up the, shall we say, additional, what could be. That's what I wanted to get, was the pair of people that would be signing a contract that would be not detrimental to the person that is involved within that flat or pod or co-living. And that's what I was trying to sort of get clear. But saying all that, I would be concerned if we got any higher than this, but I shall be supporting this anyway. But I was trying to get my mind around things, and that's what we're here for, and I make no apologies for asking it.
I have no issue with people asking questions, they just need to be planning related. That's where my line
I can't hear it.
Sorry, there we go. I have no issue with you asking questions, Councillor Henson, or any of you, they just need to be planning related, and I think sometimes we just dip a little bit out of that, and on a day where I'm a bit tired, I'm going to call you out on it, okay? Maybe I'm just always tired, Councillor Henson. So, I'm going to speak, right? I've got Councillor Hanford in a minute, but I always wait to the end and I never get to say what I was going to say. So, first of all, the waiting list. That's a really important thing, but actually what's really important is the affordable element of this is the key workers who probably don't earn enough to live in Exeter, but earn too much to be on our waiting list. And we really do need to understand that sector of the community does exist, and that it affects us as a council in who we can employ, because people can't live in the city, as well as the NHS, as well as bus drivers, which we have a severe lack of at the moment. And to be honest, teachers aren't exactly rolling over themselves to afford to live in Exeter at the moment. So I think that's a really important thing. There's our waiting list, but really the NHS workers who we are, and the key workers that we're aiming this for, are the important group that we need to be looking at. Councillor Bialik mentioned the six-year land supply. That's not been verified, so don't listen to him, he's telling fibs. It's 5 years and 7 months, I believe, at the moment. Yes. There's the price and the affordability. I understand where that argument is coming from, but I have never sat in a committee where we've asked someone who wants to build a shop how much their milk's going to cost, or someone who's going to sell us a house how much we think that's going for. And it's because we accept they're expensive, but we approve them anyway, or we just go along with it. with this, it is a new model, and I understand we don't know, but to be honest, I don't think they know at the moment, and it's their job to make their business work, not ours. And as Councillor Mitchell said, if the 80% doesn't work, they might have to look at the prices for that and how we manage it. So I wanted to get that in, and we're not working in a vacuum on build to rent. The government have very clear guidance on build to rent. We're just having to work within that instead of our own policies on build to rent. Other than that, all my concerns about this application we overcame, or I feel on balance are better based on the last time we saw it, and I think this is a better application. So I voted for it last time. I couldn't object to a better application. That would just be wrong. So I'm going to let Councillor Hanford have a go, but I wanted to get my word in for a change for everyone else.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's necessary to pick up a bit of what Councillor Henson has said, and certainly follow up a bit of what Councillor Moore has said. I mean, the reality is, and I'm sure other members are the same, it's not an infrequent conversation for me to have as a local member when a landlord in the private sector is trying to issue a Section 21 notice on a woman that happens to become pregnant. And I'm always very mindful, at this time of the year, so a few years ago, there was one landlord who was trying to do it, and I said, yeah, you can do that, but you'll be on the front page of the Express and Echo, it's near Christmas, you know? So I think the pressures on women and pregnancy wouldn't be just to here, they're across the board, and it's shameful that in this day and age, we're having that conversation. And I think the other point that has been made around people moving to Exeter, if they move to Exeter through this development and then they become in housing need, or for example they do become there, then we have hopefully we have the means as a council through Devon Choice to solve that. And I know that there's a high priority given that we would never want to knowingly see a pregnant woman homeless on the streets. Of course we wouldn't. However, I think we are looking at a bit of an experiment here, and some unknowns in terms of how it's going to work and what the market is, and we've been told that the market will heavily feature in this. I hope that it will deliver what we want in terms of key workers, affordable housing, and I personally would see this more as move-on accommodation, but then again there's nothing wrong with move-on accommodation for people finding their way in the city, moving here and building their life up and how they want to hopefully go forward. So I will be, on careful reflection, supporting it this evening, in part as well as I think the local member has indicated her support for it as well. But she did say it was a good concept and a good... did you not? Well, I'm sorry, I misheard you. I thought you said it was a good concept. But nevertheless, I hope it will achieve all that it will seek to achieve. But I will say it is an experiment, and I think once it's built, and I will say it does have some pluses. I think the outside area of the landscaping is very good. I think it ties in with the same sort of landscaping that we've got at the Ram. As you go up around the Phoenix, it's the same sort of planting and biodiversity, so I think that is very good. I think it's important we highlight some of the better points of the scheme as well as raising our concerns. But I will say, you know, if once it's built, a lot of these units go to students rather than key workers, then, you know, I think we'll see what the public opinion says at the time. But let's hope it does what it says on the tin, and I think we'll wish it well.
Thank you, Councillor Halbert. I think Ms. Dowd has got a reply to the earlier question for us.
5%.
I can't remember what the question was, so...
Units or...
Right, number of units for people, accessible units.
5% of the studios, which I equate to 14 units.
There we go. Thank you very much. Right, if no one else is asking to speak, I'm going to move to the vote. So could someone move the recommendation? Councillor Barlick, and somebody second? Councillor Williams, and then if we take a vote, all those in favour? Any favour? All those against?
2 against.
And no abstentions. Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. I'm going to just take a 5-minute break for everybody because I think we could all do with one, and we'll be back here in 5 minutes. Right. Next item on the agenda is planning application number 21119, The Muse, Bowling Green Road, Riversmead, Topsham. Roger, you're presenting.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for proposed extension and alterations to a dwelling, as the Chair said, The Muse, Bowling Green Road, Riversmead, Topsham. This is the location of the Muse, and another plan showing the same thing. Probably better understood looking at these aerial photographs, so you can see the mews itself within the red circle here, and it adjoins another property called the Coach House, as is labelled in the photograph. The same property from a different angle. And in the street scene, you can see the mews is on the left-hand side of the photograph. Coach House garage is on the right-hand side of the photograph, and joining the two is a lower garage with rooms above that forms part of the mews. Looking from the other direction. Elevations, so this is the existing front and rear elevations of the mews. So you can see the lower garage part, side elevations, and existing floor plans. And existing appearance as shown in these computer-generated images. I can come back to these if members need any further clarification later. The proposal is for a single-storey rear extension, a raised roof line above the garage with a window in the rear elevation moved away from the boundary of the coach house, solar panels with constellation roof light on the rear roof slope, new windows inserted to the front roof and first floor elevation, and timber cladding to replace tile hanging at the first floor level. But the key element of this, which is of particular relevance today, is the raised roof line above the garage and the window in the rear elevation, which are the principal concerns of the objector to the proposal. So this is the proposal front and rear elevations, which essentially is to raise the roof in the lower bit between the main mews house and coach house, so above the existing mews garage, to increase the ridge line and eaves line of the building so it's the same across the full width, so increasing the height above the garage. It also involves removal of two existing small windows near to the boundary of the coach house and replacement with a larger window just further away than the nearest small window, as you can see in the left-hand side of the bottom, the rear elevation. Floor plans, ground floor and first floor, and again, computer-generated images. Photo showing the existing arrangement. This is actually a view taken from the neighbouring property of the coach house. So you can see at the moment the ridge of the garage with rooms above is lower than the main ridge of the house, and then in the computer generated image you can see it coming all the way across the same height. So due to make a clarification or correction here, in the report, your report says that the drop from the main ridge to the linking garage element is 0.5 metres. In fact, the difference is 1.13 metres. So the increase in height will be an increase of 1.13 metres, not 0.5 metres. We've had one objection. The principal planning reason for objecting relates mainly to the raised roof line above the garage and the relocated window, which the objector is concerned will be overbearing and cause additional overlooking and overshadowing of their property. We've got some useful images here which have been provided by the objector, which show the mews main house, the mews over garage existing extension, and the coach house garage. It's important to be clear that that's the garage to the coach house and not the house itself. There's a courtyard between the garage, which is on the road frontage, and the house itself, the coach house. And you can see this is a photograph taken from within that courtyard, so it's between the coach house itself and its garage. And so you can see current window height annotated and the proposed new window height higher up, although in fact the new window will be further away from the boundary than the nearest current window at the lower level. This is taken from within the coach house itself, so you can see the existing roof height and the proposed new roof height and their relationship with the coach house courtyard and the boundary. Officers have looked at this very carefully and have been in discussions with the applicant, and it's acknowledged there will be some impact as a result of the raised roof on the immunity of the neighbour at the coach house. However, this is not considered sufficiently severe to justify a refusal. In terms of overlooking, the windows further away, and it's not believed that there will be any additional impact of overlooking compared to the current arrangements. There will be a limited amount of additional overshadowing, but because of because of the orientation, this would be the way that the sun will move around the property. This would be very limited, and there would be an impact on outlook from the additional roof area, but this is not the principal outlook from the neighbouring property. The recommendation is therefore for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for at this time? Okay, in which case, I've got two members of the public speaking to this item. First of all, we take the objective, Jeremy Meadow. Yep, the one on the right-hand side. You'll have 3 minutes and we'll give you a shout when your time's up, okay?
I appeal on behalf of my mother, and what I'm saying comes from her. We don't object to the main part of the applicant's amended application. We appreciate his modifications, but the proposed first floor extension of 1.13 metres in height, not 0.5 as in the report, will have a serious adverse impact on my mother's privacy and the use and enjoyment of her amenity, contrary, I believe, to policy DG4B, and I trust the approval recommendation is based on the error in the report. This would adversely affect whoever lives next door, but doubly so because of my mum's age and situation. She's almost 90 and has lived in the coach house for over 34 years, after being widowed early. The house sits behind a solid stone wall with conservation area of appraisal notes and sensitive enclosure and a secure garage door, and with a courtyard in front of the house. And this unique setup provides total privacy and an absolute feeling of security, and is the reason she bought the house. She uses the courtyard multiple times a day, especially as she now goes out less than she did. It's a huge part of her ability to continue living independently. In order to fully understand the setup, you may feel a site visit is appropriate. This proposal will fundamentally change this in 3 main ways. Overlooking, the proposed higher, larger window, despite being further away, commands more of a view over our courtyard and house frontage than the current small window, which is much lower and camouflaged by ivy, leading to a loss of privacy. Overbearing, as you can see, our garage roof slopes steeply from roadside to the courtyard, so from within the courtyard the increased height of this immediately adjoining extension will tower over our property, creating a hemmed-in feeling. And overshadowing, the new structure will reduce both the passage and the feel of daylight, both in the courtyard and indoors, obscuring the skyline through both upper and lower front windows. Planning is about land, but it's also about how people feel in properties and their outdoor areas. Policy clause 13.36 refers to feeling comfortable and at ease, not feeling overlooked or hemmed in, the specific principles of residential development. The photos support these points, which represent a disproportionate interference to the neighbouring amenity, which will be irrevocably and materially altered. My mum's health is already deteriorating because of this before work even starts. This began when no prior consultation was made before planning commenced and has since been exacerbated. She's just been prescribed antidepressants and triptans. We would obviously be grateful were the proposed first floor extension not to happen, but if it must, civil concerns aside, we encourage the compromise suggested by the planning officer, though declined by the applicant, to appropriately lower the overall extension height and omit the rear window, since the plans show that the room has another window and a skylight. Finally, if the application is granted, we rely upon the Council's safeguarding conditions regarding our listed wall and would request that condition 3 stipulates working hours from 9 AM with no weekend noise in consideration of my mum's health and age.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Would you be happy to take any questions? If
Yes.
there are any, let me know. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Williams, right now, sorry. Yes, you mentioned that your mother uses the courtyard as an amenity. What about, is there no further amenity on the front of the house? Is there not a garden? Or is there not a garden?
Yeah, that is the front of the house. At the back of the house there's a garden, but she's nearly 90, she goes out the front door, sits in the courtyard, also crosses the courtyard to go to the road. She doesn't go out to Topsham much, she uses that area. So yes, there is a garden at the back. The courtyard is her sanctuary.
Thank you. Councillor Lights. Sorry, this question might be kind of more of a question, but where it says 0.5 metres in here, was that just a typo, or was this considered on the basis of 0.5 metres instead of 1.3?
Yes, I did, sorry. It's a type, well, it was a typing error, but it was a mistake. We were fully aware of the extent to which the proposal was to raise the roof. I think it's clear from photographs from the case officer's site visit. We were aware that there was a difference visually between the existing ridge and the proposed ridge. So there's an error, for which I apologise, because it caused some confusion. But I don't think it has any bearing on the recommendation or the assessment of the proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. So this is a question for the planning officer. Thank you very much for your presentation. A request has been made that if this should be approved, could the working hours be limited so as to respect the condition, the health condition of the neighbour? Because normally the working hours are sort of from 8 AM to 6 PM, but could they be reduced to an hour window?
There's nothing to stop us imposing whatever hours we feel are appropriate. Although it becomes more difficult, should the objector, if we approve it, should the developer object to more limited hours, then they could challenge them. And given that that's a fairly standard arrangement with environmental health department, then we might struggle to accept reduced hours. I don't think we can make a decision based on the particular circumstances of a neighbour. It is a fairly standard approach to hours, so I wouldn't recommend that we change them from the standard arrangement unless there is a particular wider amenity issue associated with the proposal that we consider.
Thank you, Chair. I hear... Yes. Sorry, so go back to, I think, Mr. Meadow, wasn't it? Yes. And the email that you sent on 15th November 856, and it's in regarding to the differential in height from 1.2 to 0.5. Could you actually, you've emphasised in this email it's so material, and maybe just answer the concern about, you feel perhaps that this has not been taken into account. The officer is saying, I think I'm right in saying that height difference is immaterial to the application itself. Is that right? Is that what you're saying? Is that your view?
Yeah, thank you for that. I discovered this on reading the papers at the weekend. I've never been to a planning meeting before. I've learned a lot in the last few weeks about process and content. I looked at the plan, I could see that it was, I thought 1.2, I believe it's 1.13, more than double the amount stated in the report. And I was shocked, so I sent that email, again not knowing the protocol of how to raise this. What shocked me more was that knowing that this could have been passed by the delegation panel, I hadn't seen the report at that point. It was only made available to me a week before this meeting. So I was shocked that it may have been passed by that panel, not at any fault of theirs, because of 0.5 raising the roof is nothing. 4 feet is going to do the things that I've said it's going to do. So yes, absolutely, I do worry that the decision, regardless of what Mr. Clotworthy has said, was made on the wrong basis.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. One of the issues you mentioned was the overlooking with the new windows, like a large window up there. Is it an issue with opaque glass that if it is not, you cannot see out of it? I've worked my property, I can't look out of some, I've got windows, I can't look through them because opposed to other properties.
You mean if it was frosted glass? Yes. I think that would be different, but I don't know what the rules are about changing it. And would it in 6 months or a year or 4 years the glass be replaced and the problem still be there? I don't want to be petty, but if you open the window and lean out, you can just see right into our courtyard. And I know that, if you could go back a slide, I know that the sight lines there argue that the new window is better than the old window, but the old window is small and low, which you can see, and is camouflaged by an overgrowth of ivy on our side, quite near it. If you're in our courtyard, you can barely see that window. So yes, we're really unhappy about it. Frosted glass, if it was permanent, maybe. Thank you.
Okay, just to reassure you, as a member of the delegation briefing for this committee, whilst we may have read 1.5 or 0.5 or 3.2, it's actually, we were shown pictures and that gave the concept of how, you've seen them all today. So although the figure to you or to anybody is very technical may make a difference, to me I was looking at a physical thing, and that's how the decision to bring it to committee was made. So I'd just like to reassure everybody in the committee that whilst we may have had the wrong numbers, we were very aware of what we were looking at, and I think that, in the defence of our officers, they weren't trying to pretend it was smaller, they showed us exactly what the overlooking would look like.
Yeah, I'm in no way thinking it was deliberate, and I'm very pleased I sent the pictures in, and thank you for your consideration.
Okay, if there are no more questions, we will move on to the supporter, which is Simon Bristol. Thank you very much for your time this morning. You will also get 3 minutes, and we'll start speaking, and we'll shout when we run out of time. Thank you.
Good evening. The extra height transforms 2 bedrooms because the slope of the roof at the moment comes to around about my bicep, so adding the extra metre or so means that we can actually stand up in those 2 end bedrooms. So it is important to us. The house is on a very special and protected stretch of road, and as the officer's report notes, raising this roof will have, quote, little impact, and that, again, quote, any impact is positive. My wife and I thank the officers for their support. We've changed the plans and made many attempts to satisfy the neighbours, reducing many of the elements of it, no longer touching the garden wall, moving doors, moving windows, but still they're not happy. There are 3 material objections that you saw on the slide there. The alleged loss of privacy. The drawings show that the new window will offer less visibility into the courtyard than the existing. We've gone from 2 windows to 1 and moved it as far over as it can go, and we rejected the neighbour's suggestion of having a bedroom with no windows in it. The view will be at a more oblique angle, and it will be from further away. So our changes lead to less visibility, not more. As far as the loss of light, interior and exterior, the right to light, of course, is a civil matter, but given the extra roof height is just over 1 metre, and it's at least 6 metres away from the nearest window, it will have no measurable impact on internal light. On sunlight, the models show that the extra half metre will not cast any shadow on the neighbour's house or courtyard. The third element is overbearing. The words used by the objector are hemmed in, the building looming over it, and as it will obliterate the light. But the courtyard is surrounding by walls ranging from 3 metres to at least 7 metres. So the extra height of this roof, which does not even form one of the walls of the courtyard, I think cannot be said to be overbearing. So our conclusion is that the objections relating to privacy, light and overbearing do not stand up to scrutiny. Muddying the water, the objection lists many matters which are not allowable in the decision today. But I did want to just rebut 3 comments which I found too personal. The first was impugning the professionalism of the builders that we haven't even yet hired. The second one was to criticise us on communication, where I think actually a failure has been from the other side. None of the steps that have led us being here today have been shared. And finally, they call me a professional and serial property developer, clearly pejorative, and it's an untruth, which I'd like struck from the record. All in all, I'd like to thank the officers for the support, and I hope that you will follow their lead. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I'm sure you won't mind any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Moore and then Councillor Sparks.
Obviously, this has been a difficult process for both members.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
It sounds as if this has been a difficult process for both neighbours.
Yeah.
And I'm just considering the question I asked earlier. Would you have any objection to having working hours between the hours of 9 and 5 rather than 8 and 6 as is usual?
Well, I'm afraid I didn't hear what the officer said about working hours. I haven't got terribly good hearing, but I think there is a problem, I would like to reflect on it. That builders tend to start work before 9 o'clock in the morning. It's sort of the way it is. The reason I feel very deceived about this, apart from calling a serial professional property developer, which I'm not. So the first weekend we moved into the house, I sent letters to all the neighbours before when we first exchanged, and then I went to visit them all when we moved in. The first weekend we had the house, I cut the plants back from Mrs. Meadows' window because she said one of their windows looks onto our garden because she said it was too dark. Having spent one of the first 2 days we were there doing exactly what she wanted and saying when we rebuild we can plant whatever plant she wants because there's not a bit of the garden we see. I then find that, as I say, all the steps that have led us here have come without our knowledge. So it has been extremely difficult. I've no idea whether restricting the building hours makes it harder to get builders. I've absolutely no idea. But if it's not a material issue, I have no objection. Certainly all our intentions to now have been to try and facilitate a good relationship. It's just sometimes a bit difficult. So I don't know what the answer is, but
can I move on to Councillor Sparks then, please?
Thank you, Chair. We're not really here as a jury as such. It does seem that we're in the middle there between the dispute. I do wonder though, I wonder if a possible solution here to the overlooking windows is the simple application of some frosted window fill that could work as a measure. And I'm just wondering if that would help resolve some matters.
Well, my immediate reaction is that it would give the feeling that you're sleeping in the bathroom. But, I know that we all have, the objector's objection is full of lots of words like appears, and it's what the resident feels in their hearts. But I do think we have to, it's one of the other slides, but I've got, I've drawn it here, I keep drawing it for myself. Light moves in a straight line. So if you compare, if you stick your nose right in the top corner of the nearest window, if you were that minded and you were to peer into the garden, you'd see what you see. If you stick your nose in the top corner of the new window and peer into the garden, you can see less of it. Now, I might be various things, but I'm just not going to spend my time going into a spare bedroom, peering into the neighbours. I just don't care about that, but I think you have to be aware that regardless of what anyone feels about this window, or how, the heart might perceive it, it is literally giving less visibility. I can't imagine anyone being brought up here to justify reducing visibility and then being criticised for not reducing it enough. I am reducing overlooking. It's unambiguous. Of course, I've got no doubt they would like all windows to be blocked off at the back of the house. Many neighbours would like all of their neighbours' windows blocked. But, we are reducing overlooking in these plans. It's a fact.
Okay. just before I have to do something violent towards Councillor Bialik over there, who's getting quite intense. If we could move on, are there any more questions? If not, we'll move to the debate. Okay, no more questions. Thank you very much for your time. And can we move into the debate, please? Councillor Hunt.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've heard tonight that it's been difficult for both of the people represented tonight. I would like to move approval on this application. I think one of the key things that's really swung it for me is that currently Mr. and Mrs. Humphreys can't actually stand up fully in their proposed bedrooms. So I think, you know, in terms of their own amenity space within their own dwellings, I hope that some accommodation can be met around the window and the overlooking. But I think for me, the primary driver on this application is the fact that they can't even stand up in their own bedrooms. And I just don't think that's acceptable. And I think we need to grant this application. So I'm happy to propose.
Councillor Bialik.
Yes, I would support that. I don't want to feel that the objector getting listened we had, but I'm looking at it from purely planning, and I can understand wanting to try to do something to make it better. You knock 2 hours off a day, that's 1 day a week lost. That just makes it go on for longer. You know, it just makes the anguish go on longer. I think it would be far better to get it done industrially if it's going to get done. And I've got to say it, Chair, I used to live just round the corner, and this is a marvellous part of the city, around the Goat Walk, and there's around the Marshmallows, and this won't detract from anything at all in the area. And it must probably tidy it up, that roof line a little bit. I'm going to second this and support the application.
Okay, this was brought to committee, one on the request of the local members, but two, because we couldn't really reach a decision and have get briefing. Councillor Henson was there, and I'll let you speak to Councillor Henson. I would say I had issues with the overlooking, and that's one of the reasons it's here. I have to say, having watched the debate and actually get a bit more information and had a better look, I've probably changed my opinion. Okay, but if these two get ill, it's your fault, Councillor Henson. Okay? Really tried to protect a roof from cold. So we brought it to committee mainly because I was, along with others, quite concerned about the overlooking, and the local members did want it brought to committee. I have to say, despite my opinion at delegated briefing, which was very much more of there was an issue there than there wasn't, actually having this debate and seeing it and looking into it a bit more and having a bit more of a report, it's actually changed my opinion on it, and I will be voting in favour of the application. Councillor Henson.
We're, as a planning committee, we're in a difficult area here because I hear from both sides on this. The thing is, if indeed, number one, the height of or continuing, there is nothing really that is in planning that we could justify turning this down. And the other is, if indeed the officers ask for them to be moving the windows, and the applicant did, he's done what was asked of him. But as for putting glazed on there, this has been before me. People have tried to put glazed windows in because of overlooking on other properties, and it really is not the answer. If this went to planning inspectors, I think we would lose this. And to be perfectly honest, I'm quite happy to accept what the officers have said. Saying that, I was asked to come in on this from Councillor Ledbetter, and we talked about it, and nothing of my report was even in this report. That I was concerned that I'd like to have gone to the visiting committee. And I think sometimes on this, you see a lot more when you're visiting a property than you actually do on a map like this. And the area itself, I know quite well, is an area of outstanding beauty around it, and many of us would like to be down there. So I'm supporting this, because under planning law, there's nothing I can say against it that I could justify it, you know? So I'm quite comfortable on what was.
And that's the reason I don't think we need a site visit, because the site visit's not going to change the facts. That's why I don't think we need a site visit, because the site visit will not change the facts in this case. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Brown.
Can I just say that I see it as I just want to say that I support this application. I know it's got difficult, but there's only one issue. But 8 o'clock is a normal time for people.
And then that was experience. The only time I find it difficult to predict when it's the winter seasons to come, it's embarrassing. But I'm fully supporting this application.
In which case, I'm going to suggest we move to the vote. Either somebody recommend, somebody second. Oh, you're right. Whoever you want to use from that. All those in favour? All those against? And the recommendation is carried. Okay, we're moving on to item 7, which is application for land for residential development at Hillbrook Farm, Hillbrook Road, Exeter. And we're doing this swap round it. And it's mine.
Okay. Are you ready?
No, it's going to be a bit additional to what we can see.
Oh.
Honestly, 18 months into using Zoom, you think we've got that thing go by now, haven't you? Yeah, no.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks to Roger. This is an application for approval of reserved matters pursuant to a scheme that was granted outline consent not too long ago in June this year. The outline was for up to 200 dwellings, and the current application for consideration as a result of some tweaks during negotiations is 198 dwellings. First slide, you can see the site plan with the site outlined in red. You can see it's effectively 2 parcels of land, because the road that runs between the 2 red parcels was approved as part of a separate application for the land within the loop, where the cursor is hovering now. There's an aerial photograph of the site.
showing the context in terms of the Met Office sitting here and the roundabout off Hill Barton Lane, which serves the site, which is put in to serve the wider allocation. A couple of photographs. So this is looking from, as you approach from the roundabout, the site directly in front of you. There's a site from up at Cranbrook Way looking back across the site, and in the background you can see one of the earlier phases of the development. There's another photograph, similar view, but just gives a bit more impression of the undulation of the land. And that's a photograph looking from the bottom end of the site, near the main road that I was talking about as having been approved as part of the other development. There's the constraints plan, so it shows the local plan proposals map, but more importantly, the core strategy map, which shows that this land sits within the Monckton and Hill Barton strategic allocation, sort of sitting roughly where the cursor is hovering. So this is the site plan. So say this road that runs through in grey was approved as part of this phase, which is being constructed by Persimmon. So we're looking at the layout of this parcel and the open space on the south side of the road. Internally, you can see that there's a sort of loop system with another spur that comes out to join up to the top section of road. I'll just go back to that one. So when the plans were initially submitted, we had some concerns about the level of communal amenity space provided to serve the apartments that form part of the scheme, which are sitting in this corner here and over here. And that's partly the reason why the number of dwellings went down to 198, because the developer responded to those comments and introduced more amenity space to serve those apartments. So I've put in a couple of slides which are on a larger scale that show those amenity spaces put in. So you've now got a lot of communal amenity space sitting to serve those apartments. And in terms of the other block, communal amenity space provided there. The next plan, this plan of the open space, part of the open space, shows the equipped play area and a path running through the linear space, which then links through the bottom here, through into the adjoining site, and then another section of the open space with a path running through it. There's an indicative plan of the equipment to go in the play area. It's not the final version. The final details of what equipment goes in that space will be submitted pursuant to one of the conditions that's proposed. A series now of street elevations. I don't intend to talk you through them all because there's quite a few of them, but AA, the top one, and the second one is the elevation that faces the main loop road, and CC is the elevation that faces the northern road top here. I think it's there just to show you that there's two elements to the scheme. There's some very traditional designs, and there's a slightly more contemporary element to it as well. Oops. And now some more street elevations, which speak for themselves and say the same thing really. And now just a quick series of perspective elevations to give you a flavour of what the development will look like. The bottom one you're looking at is the apartments in the corner that I referred to earlier on. So that's the slides. There's been 15 representations received that are all summarised in the main report, and the key issues identified in the report relate to the principal, access matters and transportation, affordable housing, design matters, trees, biodiversity, heritage impact, flood risk, sustainable construction and economic benefits and SIL. You'll note from the main report that at the stage that was written, the Highway Authority's formal response was outstanding. They had raised a number of detailed design matters
which were put to the applicant. They have been now clarified and included within the revised drawings. And you'll see that in the update sheet, the Highway Authority have provided their now comprehensive response, which doesn't raise any objection to the scheme and just recommends 4 extra conditions that are included on the update sheet. The update sheet also includes confirmation that the Devon County Council in their capacity as lead local flood authority have confirmed the drainage information submitted is satisfactory pursuant to the outline condition which related to drainage matters. It includes 1 further representation on behalf of an adjoining landowner, which relates to land ownership matters and delivery of the scheme. And you'll see that the update sheet summarises that that's a matter that's considered not to impinge on the determination of this application. And since the update sheet was provided, we have had 1 further representation over the weekend, which relates to the appearance of construction vehicles on the site prior to determination of the application. I did nip out on site this morning. It's true there was a digger on site, but it's not clear that that's anything to do with this application, and I suspect it's more to do with the road that runs through the site, like I say, it's approved via a separate consent. And you'll also see, finally on the update sheet, there's a tweak to the wording of condition 3, and that's merely the construction environmental management plan, and there's a condition about that on the outline consent, but there's particular matters that the Met Office raised that they wanted to include it to be covered within that construction environmental management plan, and that's what that condition secures. So the report considers the proposal in the context of all the issues highlighted. You'll see the highway matters have been clarified and there's no objection. So the recommendation, as set out in the final slide, is one of approval with the 10 conditions in the main report, number 3 amended as set out in the update sheet, and the 4 additional conditions recommended by the Highway Authority.
Thank you, Mike. Councillor Hudson's going to start the questions, I think.
Mike, can you throw back the, this is the first application that's come before us of this, is it?
Go back up to the beginning.
Can you, yeah, that's what just, you know, I wanted the houses as they were, as on the hill, like they look like on the hill. No? That one. Looking at that, that's well spaced of detached houses. That's how they presented it to us, is it? Thanks. Well, I was just going to say that that looks extremely generous between the houses, and I quite like the design of what I'm looking at. But the thing worries me is that if we pass this tonight, or whatever, when we pass, or whatever we do tonight, is that they would come back and add more to that, by which case they're putting out the generous space that they see between, but crowded up again. The other thing is, I didn't see 10% of play area in the plans you presented on the whole map, because it's usually 10% of play area is of the whole. That is nowhere near it. It looks like more like 5% or 2%. And by definition, children like to have somewhere to play. And that was that. And was that the site that was going to be the traveller's site, permanent site at one point?
In answer to your last question first, I don't know whether it was ever indicated in the travel site, but it's in the core strategy now as part of the strategic housing allocation. In terms of the space between the dwellings, what you're looking at there, that elevation is mainly space, it's accommodating car parking between the dwellings, so you're not having cars sat right in front of the dwellings, but they sit between the driveways, effectively creating those gaps. Spaces.
Yeah, as long as it stays like that, yeah.
And the last question you raised about the open space, obviously, I'll go back.
Well, it's tucked away then in the corner.
go back to that drawing there. So yes, the open space is down in the southern area. In terms of quantum, it does actually, you might not look at it from that point, it does actually measure out at 11% of the site area. There is some debate as to whether how much of it is usable. There's a slight difference of opinion on that, but having said that, it's part of the allocation, and the previous phases and this phase have all been brought forward with the knowledge that the majority of the open space is coming as part of the final phase.
What I'm just trying to say is that 10% of hedges are not 10% of children's play area, and we fall foul with this on many of our sites, and we've got to watch this. And it's just a point. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mitchell.
Chair, there's a column there about sustainable construction and energy conservation within developments, and there's a comment there beside it. It's more a generic question. On large-scale developments like this, which possibly would be built over several phases and take some considerable time, at what extent can we as a planning authority influence to make sure they're built to standards we know that are coming in 2025 on gas boilers and other things, to ensure that the houses when built are future-proofed regarding energy? I think we can only determine the application as it stands, and at the moment those dwellings are designed to meet the building regulations in terms of all their heating, plumbing and everything else. So we can't, again it comes back to an earlier conversation on one of the earlier applications, we can't second guess the future, but I think they are built in such a way that they won't have difficulty in being updated to meet hydrogen boilers and whatever else comes in.
I think both you and I looked at the white paper and assessed it quite thoroughly when it was written, and whether that will ever be adopted is something else, but what was definitely not taken into account was more sustainable development, and those are the regulations we're working within, whether we like them or not, and hopefully with the local plan we can tighten that. Councillor Wall.
Thank you. I just sort of want to follow up on Councillor Mitchell's question. Can you explain what standard the construction will be to in terms of sustainable construction and energy use? It doesn't actually state that it's compliant with the limited policy that we have at the moment. I do share Councillor Henderson's concern about the lack of play areas. Can you describe, because I can't see anything mentioned in the report about access to any other community facilities, and if there are any, where the nearest ones are, if there isn't. And do any, on transport, is there any public transport near or through the site? And does the site join up in a permeable way on foot or cycling with neighbouring developments? Thank you.
In terms of energy standards, they will conform to the building regulations, and this site will connect up to the district heating as well, and on that basis it will satisfy our standards in terms of energy conservation improvements over and above the standard building regulations. In terms of play and community facilities, like I say, there are play facilities proposed on the site, and there aren't any community halls proposed as part of the wider development, so there's no other community facilities. And in terms of permeability, yes, it does connect. On this particular drawing that's showing at the moment, the connection you can see down here feeds into existing footpaths that link up to the cycle route that goes down to the Met Office, and it does connect all the other roads on existing developments, so there is that permeability through the site.
So I asked a question about public transport as well, because this seems to be like quite a car-led development. So, I mean, are there allocation of 2.5?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Spaces
You asked about bus routes, yes.
Yeah.
The whole development has been designed to facilitate future bus route through it if the Devon County and Stagecoach come forward with a route to come through the site, so it's future-proof in that respect.
But there's no route currently planned?
No.
No, okay. And are there 2.5 car parking spaces per house allocated as per the local plan?
The parking standards meet the local plan requirements, yes.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Could you just give us an estimate of the provision of accommodation for disabled people? I'm looking in, you've got, you know, the mix of dwellings, small storey apartment buildings, 2 clusters and so on, but I can't find anything in the report about, if any, are adapted for, say, wheelchair access, that sort of thing.
In terms of the affordable units, that's covered in the original section 106 on the outline, so that there will be the normal 5%, and there's also a condition on the outline in terms of these dwellings being constructed to slightly better than the standard accessibility provisions in the building regulations. So they have different grades. They have an M, category M in the building regulations, and then 1, 2, 3 brackets, these 1 higher. And all the dwellings will be constructed first time.
Okay, there are no more questions. I'm going to bring forward Councillor Wood, who is speaking under Standing Order number 44. Councillor Wood, you are not limited to 3 minutes, but do not feel that you have to fill in for that amount of time.
Chair, sorry, before Councillor Wood starts, we are dealing with reserved matters. The application, the outline has been agreed, so we're only dealing with reserved matters.
Reserved matters and with access.
Thank you.
Agreed, isn't it? Yes. Sorry, yeah, I should have said that.
Thank you. Well, I'll start by recognising that this site, the site of this development is within the strategic allocation and has already received outline planning permission. So obviously the application relates to the detail of the layout of the development and how it connects to the local setting under reserved matters. Perhaps somewhat unusual for an objector, I would like to thank this committee for its recent decisions which protected the green spaces and hills around Exeter that define the city. I believe that's a quote from somebody. I also want to be clear that I'm not against development in principle, and indeed welcome new residents to the ward, many of whom I have met and got to know, and who make a great addition to our local community. But I cannot speak on any pinhole application without commenting on the excessive cumulative impact of individual developments on all aspects of local infrastructure, including roads. Our own planning documents make specific note of the need to be aware of cumulative, why can't I say it? Cumulative. Thank you. Cumulative impact. The cumulative impact is most visible on our roads, but goes much wider. It does not seem to be recognised when individual applications are considered. And this is one such application. It joins a long queue of applications that have arrived and developed in Hoe, almost beyond recognition as far as some residents are concerned. The officer's report appropriately lists the relevant policies, which includes, amongst others, I could cite, the most overarching policy being the core strategy. The core strategy includes specific recognition of the Monkerton and Hillbarton Master Plan, which was approved by this council, and highlights issues such as infrastructure, open space, play areas, permeability for pedestrians and cyclists. Its intent was to bring together and address the combined needs and impacts of intensive development across disparate sites. The cumulative, I can't say it. The impact. The officer's report specifically quotes CP18 from the core strategy. This states that the development must be supported by appropriate infrastructure provided in a timely manner. Often a thing missed by a lot of developers. They do provide some amenities, but it's always the last thing that's done. But in this instance, we've not even seen that. Contributions will be used to mitigate the adverse impacts of development, including cumulative impact, specifically stated within our strategy. The plan also lays out strategic allocations and includes a summary of the context and impact
of the Monkerton and Hill Barton Master Plan. This development forms a part of this, which is also noted in the principal proposed development on number 16 of this report. The core strategy and master plan both specifically note that a community centre and other facilities, including GP facilities, and appropriate local areas of play space should be created as part of the combined development. And that is our problem. We are seeing a number of different applications coming in. Combined, they should have achieved and provided amenities within in-home. Individually, they haven't been asked to do it, so collectively, they haven't done it. It should be noted that local community facilities of all types are at capacity, including the GP practice, where the waiting time for even phone appointments has stretched to more than a week. Indeed, the practice has recently contacted local ward councillors to see how the council can help provide a solution to the demand on its services, which are beyond what it can meet. There is also the question of traffic and transport, and the Hill Barton Vale railway station included in the Devon Metro Plan, but of which there is no indication. The strategy and master plan also specifically references to what is termed an open space framework, which I quote, should comprise a range of linked formal and informal open spaces, including parks, playing fields and allotments. Not a lot of which we see. Again, this application does not recognise this requirement, nor leaves the physical space to allow it to be created. And that is one of the biggest challenges we see with new developments. Although there's a commitment, and sometimes there's Section 106 funding to deliver some of these things, when the plan comes out, it's all about houses and minimum requirement for open space. There's never a gap for the local store or for any of the other things. It's always assumed this will somehow be, space will be acquired for this somewhere else in the ward. Never a space left on the map. These deficiencies in the proposal are recognised in the objections from local residents, the Exeter Cycling Campaign, and from our own Public and Green Spaces team. These are valid issues running at odds with our own policies. Some of these issues could be addressed through Section 106 funding agreements or other funding agreements for investment off-site and some redesigns within the current plan. There are many issues that need to be addressed, but there are some specific ones. Investment in play area. We've seen a number of illustrations of the play equipment that will be provided. We have found in our local, in new developments, the council no longer takes on management of play areas in new developments. It's actually taken on by usually an independent company set up specifically to manage green areas on new estates. Our experience is that the equipment provided is not as you would find in a council play area. It is not the same standard. It does break, it does wear out. The illustration is lovely. It's wooden play equipment, lovely. How long will that last? When will it be replaced? How will it be replaced? And these are issues that are starting to come to light within some of the play areas, in some of the new developments that are now kind of aging. Those play areas and those green spaces are a problem, and it's a problem that the local residents, when they buy their property, not all of them realise, but they're signing on to contribute to the cost of maintaining those green areas and those play areas. And we aren't seeing it playing out very well. A much needed local convenience store, where this application attaches to a number of other housing developments which are all new. So it's the Rougemont Estates, the Hill Barton Estate, now it's this one, and it's a solid block of housing. If you live in this one, you've got to walk through the other estates before you're out onto the main road. Then you have to walk a distance, again, if you're to reach one of the local shops. If you just want a loaf of bread or a pint of milk, there's a high likelihood you're going to get in your car to go and get it, and that's kind of not where we want to be. But there's no space on here to develop the local shop, which is suggested within the Monkerton and Hillbarton Master Plan and reflected in our core strategy. There needs to be investment in community facilities. As I've said, all our facilities are at full capacity. One of those facilities being the Pinho Hub, which has yet to be built, needs the funding. I have to declare I'm a trustee on that hub, and I'm a trustee on the hub because I recognise our ward needs more facilities, so I'm committed to trying to land that. Funding from this site, as with other sites, could have been allocated to the hub through Section 106 agreements, hasn't been. Just recognising that the community facilities are at capacity. Also within the Monkerton and Hillbarton Master Plan, there's mention of allotments. I've not seen those arrive across these developments either. And as my fellow ward councillor David Harvey would be sure to let you know, allotmenting is actually very rewarding. It keeps you healthy, it gets you outdoors, it re-engages you with nature. Allotments may sound like a bit of a niche activity, but it is actually a great way of remaining healthy, both physically and mentally. So not having the allotments that were meant to be there is a bit of a loss. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Does anyone have any questions for Councillor Wood? Councillor Hapford.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask Councillor Wood his opinion of the fact that the amenity area, the play area, seems to be sort of detached or semi-detached from the area of housing? I mean, normally when a big housing development is built, historically the play area has been in the centre of the development as a sort of focal point for the families to come together. Here it feels like it's sort of floating away towards the Met Office. What's your view of that?
I think I'd agree with that observation. It is at the edge of the development. When I look at the plan, if I lived in the top left-hand corner, I think my children would have a long way to go to access the play area. I think one of the things that the master plan looked to have was not directly connected, but a run of green space going through these developments. And this area that's been allocated, a lot of it, as Councillor Henson was alluding to, an amount of it, when you look at the bigger plan, is actually not included in the play area. There's some darker green strip and then some bushes, so it may be 11%, but it's not 11% play area. And I think that, as you say, normally if you're building, this is a brand new community and it's attached to two other brand new communities, so some basis on which you can generate community spirit would be a good idea. Play areas aren't just where children go to play, they're where adults and parents meet each other. It's sometimes where community activities happen. If you're going to have a fun day, you have it in and around the play area. So having it down on that edge there does seem a little bit perhaps more convenient for the architect and the developer than for the people who might end up living there, who, as you say, might have preferred it to be more central to the development. It's about, for me, the additions to the Pinho ward, it's about people, it's about bringing people back into our community and welcoming them, but it is about people and it's about communities, and I think that that is a little bit sidelined.
Any further questions, Councillor Wood? In which case, thank you very much for your time. I'd like to call Tom Rocky? Thank you. Who's speaking in favour. Unfortunately, you do have the only 3 minutes, I'm afraid.
Good evening. This application is important to the City Council since it will deliver housing where the Council considers it should go as part of a sustainable urban expansion at Monkerton Hillbarton. It will make a positive contribution to your 5-year housing land supply and therefore reinforce your position in resisting development in less acceptable locations. The development has an acceptable density that reflects your aspirations for this area, and it will make efficient use of suitable housing land that is in very short supply within the city's boundaries. A good mix of homes is provided, ranging from 1 to 5 bedrooms, comprising a variety of unit types, including apartments, terraced, semi-detached and detached properties. The proposal will therefore provide for a mixed, balanced and inclusive community. 69 affordable homes will be provided, with a predominance of 1 and 2 bed units in response to the greatest need, as reflected in the latest Devon Home Choice Quarterly Monitoring Report. That report confirmed that 82% of housing need in Exeter is for units of such a size, and therefore the proposals respond directly and positively to the area of greatest housing need. 11% of the site area, as you've heard, is dedicated to public open space, which exceeds your policy requirement of 10%. The principle of the green corridor in this location was agreed as well, was established through the Monkton Hill Barton Master Plan study, so we followed that exactly. And in this location, we provide good accessibility not only to this development, but to neighbouring developments and the homes that have already been built. As acknowledged in your officer's report, it will therefore assist with alleviating pressures on existing facilities, and to which residents have made a reference in their representations. This is also the flattest part of the site. It's a sloping site, but this is the flattest part, enabling the provision of a usable area, which would not be achievable elsewhere on the site. The dedicated area includes a lab for younger children, a leap for older children, as well as areas for informal recreation and sitting out. In accordance with the agreed approach to the Monkton Hill Barton development as a whole, additional space will be provided as part of the Ridgetop Park in the final phase of development. And then an update to the information in the officer's report. The application for that final phase has now been submitted, so it's coming forward. The means of access have been approved under outline permission, and the spine road through the site as part of the adjacent development. The internal roads within the development will be predominantly shared surfaces in which pedestrians and cyclists have equal opportunity, have equal priority as motorised vehicles, and in which vehicle speeds are very low. That's accepted in your own residential design guide and national guidance in manual for streets, and is something that's encouraged again through the master plan. Chair, I commend the recommendation to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you tell me what impact you've made in terms of air pollution generated from the site as a result of car journeys, and how that contributes to the cumulative impact of air pollution in the area? Thank you.
Well, Chair, there's, through the Outline Commission, an air quality assessment was submitted, and the outline approval has been granted, and it's granted on the basis of that assessment. And that assessment indicates that there'll be no unacceptable adverse cumulative impact.
Thank you. I'm still a little bit of samples. Most estates, new estates, usually look for is to have a soul in that estate. And what is lacking is massing up the top, and just as we I was told, that there is 11% of player area here. But a state needs soul, and the families must feel that they don't have to walk or let young children go a long way to get to perhaps the area you have allocated for play area. And that is what I feel, and it happens. I represent St. Lloyd's, which is opposite to this, or runs next door to this ward here. And one of the things that we have, and we're very lucky, is to have...
Let's excuse picking on you.
You asked the question, please. Sorry. Thank you. I would just like to ask why it was just put to one end or put a bit of green at the other end that could be, they could feel that there was a green patch that they, that the residents could use perhaps to sit on, or older people could sort of enjoy. Why is it so, because that's the Met Office here, isn't it?
Chair, as I explained in my presentation, we are following the principles which you as a council set through the Moncton and Hillbarton Master Plan study, and which shows the open space as a linear area flanking the southwestern side of this particular part of the development area. So we are following to the letter exactly what you have identified as what you wanted. But it's important, I mean, I understand the point being made, it's important to consider this site in the context of the wider development. This is just one piece in the jigsaw. And there's play areas on the development, on the David Wilson development, which is to the west of us. There's green space on the Persimmon development to the east, which is the whited out area. And probably most importantly, the final phase of development is to our north. So it's just going off the top of the screen. And that is the application which has just been submitted. Now that application includes very substantial open space. It includes a multi-use games area. It includes another lab. It includes two leaps. And that approach, providing that ridge-top park, is again established in the Moncton and Hillbarton Master Plan, and it was very much Councillor Edwards' vision that a substantial area of space should be provided to serve the development as a whole in that location. So that is why I think it's important, as I said, to look at this individual development in the context, within the framework that you as members set, in which we have followed to the letter. But it's also important to understand that the core of this development, the central part, has been developed very much on a neighbourhood principle, what we have called the neighbourhood core. It's a very low traffic area. And your vision for this character area, Hillbarton character area, says this: limited through traffic, changes the emphasis of residential streets from vehicular corridors to spaces for play, to chat, and for community interaction. The neighbourhood core has been designed very much with that in mind, following those principles. So whilst you've got your green space flanking up the periphery of the southwestern edge of our site, you have the neighbourhood core, which will function as community interaction space for the people who live around it and who live as part of it. And so we have followed exactly the principles that you set for developing this site and the wider development area.
Thank you, Ms. Rodney. Thank you. Councillor Williams, a quick question. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ox, for clarifying the green spaces play area part and saying that it has to be taken in context of all the other developments as well. I would like to hear your comment though in response to Councillor Wood's comment about community hub, because I think that many members have made that point, that these are quite important, just having somewhere to go and get your homes built and your newspaper. So could you just comment on that in the context of all the development?
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And of course, going back to the master plan, Hillbarton Master Plan study, and the overall master plan for the development, that identifies two areas for local centres. One in proximity to Sainsbury's at Pinhole, and the other to the west of us, Hillbarton, in conjunction with the proposed rail halt. Now, I understand that certainly for the Hillbarton local centre, the land has been set aside, but nothing has happened to that. Now, as some members may know, I've been involved in promoting the Moor Exchange scheme, which is to the south of us, and which is intended to deliver to deliver very significant community facilities. Unfortunately, the pandemic, Brexit, it means the market at the moment isn't there to deliver that scheme. But as soon as the market comes back, there is a commission sitting there, which I've been involved with, which will provide very substantial community facilities to serve Monkton Hill Garden development area as a whole. And it's the combination of those local centres and the more exchange proposals which provide the opportunity and the locations in order to deliver those facilities. In terms of delivering community facilities, it's important to remember that this scheme and the other residential developments will deliver very substantial community infrastructure levy receipts, and that those community infrastructure levy payments can be used to fund the community facilities that have been mentioned, and that is within the gift of the council to deploy those very significant sums towards delivering community facilities.
Thank you very much for your time. Okay, I'm going to open the application to debate. Councillor Haverford got his hand up first.
Thank you, Chair. This takes me back a long time ago when I was first involved with Exeter with all the building along Kinnison Way and the community centre and Clover Avenue and Lavender Way and all the rest of it. And again, we'd lost the big supermarket and then we had all the new housing, and we had to fight and struggle to get the new community centre built. But most importantly there was the shop. The shop was actually more important in a way than the community centre, because it was that interaction, it was that hub that we had there. So I think we've got all kind of two things before us today. We've got this application, which is, for land that we knew that was going to be developed. And we're looking at that in itself, clearly, on its own merits. But there is a bigger context, and I think a lot of us have been really concerned, particularly about Pinho, that it's these developments that keep coming in. I mean, I suppose we're lucky, if you want to use the phrase, that at least there is some open spaces and play area here, because further off in Pinho, as Councillor Wood will know, we've had these blocks of flats and these small bits of housing that just manage not to provide any affordable housing or any open space, and then of course they just sort of grow like bacteria without providing any community facilities. And I think there is a need. I have to say, I didn't want to come in just now, Chair, because of how long we've been here, etc. But I was most unsatisfied about the response about community facilities. It was sometime when, I don't know, and actually there's already been substantial development here, and they need community facilities now. They do need the shop, a local shop, a focus, and what I'm hearing is from the outset that isn't going to be happening anytime soon. And that's and I don't know what we can do about that, whether we can add that into a recommendation or revisit the plan itself, or look at doing something about it, because I think the fear is as well, the public transport, I get that the bus can't run through because it's not all developed yet, but people will be making a view of it when they move in. And once they've moved in, and it is, again, I think this is another car-led development, those habits will be in. They'll moved in because they've made a judgment that they're not going to be able to walk to the local shop, or everything's going to be a fairly long distance journey. So is that enough to not pass this application? Probably not. But I do think, we have a serious issue in this part of the city where infrastructure is not coming in a timely way. I think it's referred to as in a timely way. I think the local councillors have got a really serious job about trying to get the community to pull together. And I think I have to say, with the greatest amount of respect to developers, this planning application is about building homes, or houses rather. It's not about building communities, and I think that's a problem for the local members and the whole city as a whole, because you're going to be building up all sorts of problems there about social cohesion, community interaction. We've already seen this in parts of the city, at Newcourt, for example, where we've had a lot of antisocial behaviour problems with young people. So let's learn our lessons. We probably have to pass this today, but can we take this bigger conversation back through the planning department to help this part of the city develop in a sustainable way? Thank you, Chair.
I think let the planners tell me if I'm wrong. I think the fundamental problem is the planning system, which is set up to bring the housing before any of the infrastructure due to it being market driven. So whilst I understand your frustrations, I don't think it's a local and I've got you council.
Okay, thank you. I want to get back to this planning application, if that's okay. And not necessarily trying to put all the ills of that part of town correct, although I think there is a few to put right. Can I make a suggestion to the officers next time that when we have perhaps the next application, although they're nearly all done, that perhaps we have a couple of papers actually showing us what the master plan looks like? Because do you know what? We don't put an electric fence around each of these applications and say to people, you can't walk over there, you can't walk over there, because they don't see the lines, they just see the whole area. So let's keep it in perspective. One of the officers told us that an application is coming along the lines whereby it will be more open space. I won't be waiting for that one, because it better be, okay? And perhaps we need an assessment of the total master plan area and to look at the whole issue going across. Yeah. And that's what we need to do, because then that may help form our judgment when we're coming here and we're trying to rehearse everything from scratch about open space, about a play park. Look, we've had a document which went through council only a year or so ago, which clearly talked about our play park strategy, what we're doing in the city and how we're trying to do it. And we've got to fit it in with all of that. Now, I don't know, I've seen one of the, somebody against it was complaining about trees and edges or something, or loss of trees. And then we were having a discussion about hedgerows. But I don't know about you, I quite like hedgerows. I quite like a few trees. It's called biodiversity, isn't it? So we just don't want smoothly cut grass everywhere with play equipment on everything. We need to have it. So I'm just asking people just to think outside, I was going to say outside the box, but outside the planning application in particular, to think what they've got around and the applicant explains some of that bigger picture stuff to us. As for pints of milk and bread, well, you can get them delivered, by the way, and support milkmen and milkwomen in some good ones, and they generally come in glass that can be recycled, so think about that, save on the old plastic. So there's lots of options, and the other thing that I think we have got provision within the master plan, as we've been told, for shops. Now, our problem is, in a lot of these other areas is, maybe a bit different after COVID now, I don't know, is that they've been put there and not taken up. Okay? Because the big shop has been done at a big supermarket. Yes, they do want the odd pint of milk and everything else. So that's a problem. It's not our role as the planners to do business cases for business, unfortunately. We can't even have the power to put in health centres that I think we should, but we can't. But what the RD&E and practices now do, when they tell you they've got help, they want help from you, they actually now get money from SIL. They make an application for SIL, so they need to manage it. So what I'm really saying is we've had the outline, let's move in presently to accept it. I think perhaps it would help if every member of the committee had a copy of the master plan, where we are so far and what is to come. And then I think everybody will see the big picture of what is trying to be designed in that area. As for community facilities, we had a community grants document that was done 2 years ago. We're looking to review that. We're happy to review it. We've got a community grant, although they deal with grants. We're always prepared to have a debate on community facilities. We are working with Pinhole to have that hub down at by the railway station. I don't know whether or not people at the top of Hill Barton will naturally gravitate down there. I don't know. So what is the other facility? They must probably gravitate over the road more towards Thornbark Rise. So they're all coming your way, Yolanda. That's where they'll most probably gravitate. So the master plan is there So we need to see it, Chair, and not get too embroiled in just looking at this one application in isolation when it comes to those answers or things we need answers for. So I'm going to support the application. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Moore. Thank you. There seems to be so far a bit of a suggestion that there's an inevitability that we have to accept this application and that we can't invite the developer to go away and reconsider a better scheme. Well, I have a couple of concerns. In page 28 of the master plan, it does provide an opportunity for developers to bring forward other community facilities which are not actually specified in the master plan. I think this is an important part of creating community cohesion. That is not addressed in this application in any way, and particularly in the light of the significant number of houses that are being built in this area. The master plan doesn't exclude other policies that the council has adopted, just as Councillor Alec has mentioned in terms of referencing other policies. And I'm very disappointed to see that we haven't got an assessment from the environmental health team on air pollution and assessing the applicants' a submission that they made to demonstrate whether or not there is a cumulative impact as set out in the National Policy Planning Framework in terms of air pollution. And this is a very car-led development. Developments that we've seen recently are moving away from being a car-led development and priding themselves in not meeting the standard for car parking sites. We have I can't see in the application documentation any reference to development of a sustainable travel plan, which is the expectation in terms of the transport supplementary planning document. So it's a very poor application in terms of the transport, questions about air quality, questions about community facilities, and this layout which doesn't create community cohesion. So therefore I can't support this, and I would invite the applicant to take on board comments and rethink it if we go past this.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. So, did you want to speak, Councillor Hanson? Yeah. Okay, I won't start here.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not arguing against trees or hedges or whatever, but it is legitimate to question the fact that we are being shown area that is hedgerows that seem disguised as a play area. That is not what I'm here to agree to. I do not want to see trees taken down, or I don't want hedges to see to be played. I'm far from it. I've fought for it for over many years trying to keep them. But what I am not being put off about is the fact that this is not. The officers must understand that there is concern that there is play areas wanted. And if this is what comes from the decisions to the developers, is what we are asking as planners to the developers, then so be it. But that won't stop me or anybody else or anybody in this room asking questions when we need to ask questions if I feel it's not right. And time and time again, we have had hedgerows and trees taken out for play areas. And is this what is happening? I have a right to ask that. And as councillor, I should continue to ask that. The other thing is that's going to be quite interesting is that the Met Office is to the right, and that's got a great deal of open space. And that's going to be one beautiful area where the people are going to use as an open space by just whipping over the fence. Then the next thing we're going to have is be responsible to put up a huge fence from us, because the Met Office is going to complain that there is residents playing or children are playing in the play. That's what is just facing me that I can see. But I'm not against trees or shrubs, but I do feel there is a lack of open space at the top. And I know what the working plan or master plan is. Phil, so don't bother sending me a second one.
Okay.
I was in alright.
Before I let Kareem want to speak for a minute and Zia want to speak, just because I have canvassed this area before, and so you all know what I'm about to say. This bit here is a play area with play equipment in it. So I understand what you're saying about it all being down here, but if we put it up there, it would be a bit counterproductive. Now, I have many other opinions on this, but I just have to say that because we're getting obsessed with play areas, and there's one there. Okay?
No, I'm not as person.
Now it's Seal who's going to speak, Councillor Henson. You've had your...
Just corrected me. I have just repeatedly said to you, I do not want
You've got... Councillor Henson, you have the right to speak and you've had your moment, but I have the right to correct you. There is a play area there. Now, Councillor Lights has put up her hand and asked to speak, and I'm allowing her to speak now, Councillor Henson.
Then I will come back to you.
I've lost my train of thought, sorry. Yeah, okay, I understand that we have to look at this within context. I live on an estate without a lot of services, and I just want to make the point that it's not great for your mental health, and it's not great to invite families to move into areas that don't have a lot of services. And I understand there are play areas, but we don't always go to the play areas in the winter. They're not always that easy to, not great places to meet people. It's much easier when you have a community hub. And if there is any way that the developer could support, the hubs that is already existent or further hubs, I don't think you can have too many of them. It is quite a lot of houses, and I understand you can walk and go to other places and play parks within that area, but looking at it and knowing that I live somewhere a little bit like this, and what it was like before we had a hub, it's really depressing. It's not good for people's mental health, it's not good for people with families, it's not good for disabled people who cannot go far away, it's not good for people who don't drive. We're also saying that a lot of the services are run, then assuming the schools are as well, so you're not even going to get that local school community because you're driving to further schools that are further out. So I would just wanted to make that point that it's not just about, you can have your pints delivered at home. Sometimes, especially in the pandemic, you don't speak to anyone in your local area if you don't drive to faraway places or you have little children, and it's winter and you're not going to the play area every day because it's soaking wet, then actually those hubs are a lifeline. And if there is any way that we can encourage developers to support them as much as possible, especially given there's already kind of one there, that will have overreaching impacts, not just where it's based at, but for everybody in that area who sometimes does need to just go and see someone, not just to buy a pint of milk, but to have a human conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lights. I'm going to let Mike Higgins speak and then Kareem Sam as well.
Okay, just to try and clarify things from that, because in terms of your thinking, it's important to remember that this is coming forward as an application now, but it is part of a strategic application, some of which have been delivered, some of which has a consent, including one of the earlier phases which did include an area that is reserved for a small retail facility. Now, that's obviously not within our gift to bring that forward. That's got to come forward when there's a demand and when there's someone that shows interest in bringing that forward. And we are governed by the very original outline which set parameters for that. The outline for this development did bring forward a lot of those requirements in terms of contributions towards the rail hub, sustainable travel plans. So all that has been brought forward in the current outline. But what you also have to remember is the application you are considering now is a reserve matters pursuant to an outline that was solely for up to 200 houses. It wasn't an outline for some houses with a community facility, with a community hub. So it's important to look at it in the context that that's what you're considering today.
Thank you, Mike.
Chair, if I can, because I absolutely understand members' frustration about the way the planning system works. I understand the frustrations that you're basically presented with a reserve matters application for houses, what you want to create a communities. I get that. And the whole concept behind what Exeter is that you people first. It's not just about houses. But you can't, on an application of reserve matters, put right the famous planning system. And I do just need to take you back to the fact that we do not have a definitive master plan for Hillbar and Moncton. We have a master plan that very early on, when it was tested, it was told to us by the inspector that it's not the master plan. In other words, you have to conform literally to that. Developers have the option of bringing forward their master plan. And that's exactly what they did. And it's exactly why Councillor Edwards at that time said, we can't build 10% play areas and hope that's going to deliver for us what we were aspiring to achieve. We need to make a strategic public space provision along the ridge, and what is now being presented are corridors that link up with a strategic provision. So if you compare that with the original master plan, you will not see it exactly corresponding, because that master plan was abandoned right from the beginning. It was just a master plan. This is the frustration with the planning system. So with this current application, this reserve matters, you agree with the principle. We can't go back on and unpick the original permission. We've given permission to 200 units in principle. And when it comes to hubs and community infrastructure, we tax it called a SIL. It's our gift where we want to provide that. So I think you have to be disciplined and focus on the reserve matters, as opposed to putting right the failure of the planning system, which I could write a book about, which we're trying to solve with the next 20 years of our city with the Live Well Exeter concept.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
My point of order.
You can have point of order, Yolanda.
I don't like to be misquoted, Chair, but I was not arguing against what it is. It is what it might take. And that's all I did ask, was that the officers look that it is not taking hedges under the disguise of a play area.
Right, I feel like I've been on this planning committee in this meeting for 6 years, but I've definitely physically been on it for 6 years, which means that I think only Councillor Henson and Councillor Bialik are here tonight, I think, because we're missing Councillor Sutton. So I know that the applications on the other side of the Hill Button estate allocated community space within the school. There's a room there. I don't know how practical that is, but there is. I was going to talk about the Ridge Line, which we should definitely call it Edwards Ridge, without a doubt, because I forgot he was responsible for it. We have given consent for the Moor Lane development, whether I liked it or not. So there are shops there, there is a bus service that's supposed to go through the estate down to the Moor Lane development. I can appreciate what you're saying, but Pennsylvania is very different to Hill Barton, which is a much flatter route, and also has the developers nodding. That doesn't mean I think you're perfect, I just think in planning context this is not so bad. There is Sainsbury's and an Aldi at the end of there. You cross the road into, we were talking about it just a minute ago, Thornbuck Rise around that area. There's a hairdresser's, there's a chip shop, there's all sorts of things there. So we are not completely in the wilds of nowhere, and I think you're right about Pennsylvania, but this is a very different site. I think SIL is the vehicle that Councillor Wood needs to be taking advantage of, so he needs to be lobbying the leader of the council, which I know he already is doing. And going back to the point, the Southland planning permission, we've already given into the concept of this as part of the master plan. It is already in our 5-year, 7-month land supply. If we refuse this application, it is no longer, well, it's sort of there, but it's not coming forward. That means it can drop out, and that starts to affect other decisions we have recently made. I don't think this is perfect. I don't think the planning system is perfect, and I worked in planning in the east of England where they built Camborne, which was a new town, and it was there for 8 years before the pub was built. Do you know? Despite the fact it was always on the plan, all those issues were there. We've not learned anything. That was under a Labour government, so I'm not even being political here. We've not learned anything from then to now. We're still making the same mistakes, and I think we're right. We should.
didn't move to vote.
Yeah, I know, but I didn't take the vote. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to vote in favour of this application. I think you're all right. I just want to say that. No one's saying wrong with the opinions of profit. I think you are all right. I think the planning system is broken in many ways and we're working in that. So, would someone like to move the recommendation? Yes, Councillor Sparks. Would someone like to second it? Councillor Denning. Could we move to the vote? All those in favour? Right. Well, abstention. Thank you, Councillor Moore. Sorry. I didn't see your hand. In which case we are moving to the list of decisions made and withdrawn. Who is doing that? Is that Roger?
Thanks, Chair. On the list of decisions, I've not been notified of any of those questions, and I'm specifically asked to notify them to note of the report.
Thank you very much, Roger. And the list, the appeals report as well. Roger, is that you too?
Yes, thanks. There are 3 appeals summarised, all of which were dismissed. Again, I've not been notified of any questions on them.
Councillor Moore's got a hand up there.
Quick question. What happens to enforce the changes to put it back how things work? So it's making here. What do you do to enforce these appeals and when they've changed things already to make them be what they should be?
If it's appropriate because something has happened, if something's been dismissed but it's already occurred, then if we don't have an open enforcement case, we will now create one and enter into an investigation on how to rectify it. Is there one of these particular cases that's concerning you?
No, just quite a principle, just understand.
Final item on the agenda is the site inspection party.
Chair, can somebody cover me on the 30th? I've got an appointment with the
Oh yeah, well that's a very good reason not to be there, Councillor Violet. Can anyone step into that?
I'll swap the next one.
Well, yeah. Councillor Sparks, okay, that's Councillor Sparks, Councillor Williams, and I on the 30th of November at 9:30. Thank you for your time and patience this evening, everyone.